So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Become Devil and Built Harem World. So let's start the series. The Hollow Victory. The air didn't smell like smoke. That was the first wrong thing. It smelled like ozone and wet chalk, like the world was a giant blackboard being erased. Naruto Uzumaki, 7th Hokage, stood on what used to be the Valley of the End. The water below was gone, replaced by a shimmering, viscous substance that reflected no light, only a distorted, funhouse mirror version of the bruised sky above. His knuckles, pressed against the cold, rain-slicked stone of Madara's towering statue, were bone-white. The orange of his Hokage cloak felt garish now, a child's costume in a funeral home. The fabric, usually a comforting weight, was clammy and heavy, like a shroud that had absorbed the damp of 1,000 graves. "Report," he said, his voice gravelly. It hadn't cracked. Not yet. Sai's ink bird, its form bleeding at the edges like watercolor in the rain, landed on his shoulder. It didn't feel like cool, smooth ink, it felt tacky, unstable. It spoke with Sai's flat, strained calm, but the tone flickered with static. Northern perimeter gone. The 5th division, consumed. Shikamaru's last transmission indicated the entity absorbs chakra and memory. It leaves husks. They're empty. Empty. The word bounced around Naruto's skull, a dull pebble in a tin can. He saw Iruka-sensei's crinkled eyes smile over a bowl of miso, Konohamaru's shit-eating grin after a successful Rasengan, the exact way Shikamaru would sigh, rub his temples, and call him a monumental drag even as he moved heaven and earth to help. Empty. It wasn't death. Death left a body, a story, a ghost. This was deletion. Sasuke? Contact lost 2 hours ago. Last confirmed visual had him engaging the core with Sakura and the Hyuga forward contingent. Hyuga. Hinata. A cold, precise terror, sharper than any chakra-infused kunai, slipped between his ribs. He hadn't felt fear like this since Pain's rods had pinned him to the ground. But this was colder, quieter. This wasn't about his own pain. It was about the imminent, irrevocable subtraction of his world's light. His stomach clenched, a hard, physical knot. The cheap, salty ramen he'd bolted down hours ago turned to acid in his gut. Location of the core? It's moving. Towards your position. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. The world was ending in 3 minutes, and all he could think about was the way Hinata's hair smelled like lavender and sun-warmed linen when she hugged him goodbye that morning. She'd fixed his crooked collar, her touch fleeting and sure. "Come home to us," she'd said. Not a plea. A statement of fact. A law of her universe. He pushed off the statue, landing silently on the non-water. It gave under his feet with a sickening squelch, like walking on a giant lung, sucking at his boots with each step. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, purpling into an unnatural twilight that cast no shadows. No birds called. No wind stirred the still air. Just that deafening, high-pitched hum, a sound that vibrated in his molars and made the fillings ache. It was the sound of reality straining at its seams. He formed the cross sign, the motion so ingrained it was a part of his DNA. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 1,000 clones poofed into existence around him, a sea of orange and blonde and determined, furrowed brows. The sight usually filled him with a buzzing, electric confidence. We're in this together. Now, it just felt thin. Desperate. Paper soldiers against a coming inferno. Their collective presence, which should have radiated warmth, just made the air feel colder, thinner. Rasengan variations. Distract and contain. By time for the rearguard evacuation, he yelled, his Hokage voice booming across the unnatural silence. The clones roared back, a sound that tried to be brave but echoed hollowly, swallowed by the all-consuming hum. He felt it before he saw it. A drop in pressure so sudden it made his ears pop painfully. The air grew thick and cold, each breath like inhaling slush, scraping down his throat. Then, the world split. Not a crack in the ground. A rip in the canvas of everything. A vertical seam of absolute black, 10 stories high, tore open in the air 200 yards in front of him. No light escaped it. No sound. It was a tear in a silent film. From it poured not an army, but an absence. The void maw wasn't a creature, it was a walking famine. It had a shape, a vaguely humanoid outline of swirling, charcoal-gray mist that seemed to eat the very detail from the air around it, but its edges drank the light, the sound, the texture from the world. Where it stepped, the gelatinous ground turned to inert, fine gray powder that gave off no smell. The clones that charged it didn't explode or poof. They simply unraveled. Their edges blurred, their color leached away, and they streamed into the maw's form like sand into a vortex, silently. Naruto's blood ran cold. This wasn't a fight. It was erasure. He charged anyway. The Nine-Tails chakra mode cloak erupted around him, a familiar, comforting inferno of gold and crimson. It felt like slipping into a second skin, Kurama's growl a comforting rumble in the back of his mind. Let's go, idiot. He launched forward, feet barely touching the ground. Raisin Shuriken. The whirring, screaming sphere of cutting wind left his hand, a miniature sun of destructive power. It flew true, struck the center of the swirling mist, and dimmed. Its furious roar became a whisper. It shrank, compressed, and was swallowed without a sound, like a pebble dropped into a bottomless well. The maw didn't flinch. It didn't stagger. It turned a non-face towards him, and Naruto felt a gaze that wasn't eyes, a regard that was the absence of regard. A tendril of stillness lashed out. It didn't move fast. It moved with the inevitability of tide. Naruto twisted in mid-air, the golden cloak flaring, but the air where the tendril passed became brittle and tasteless. He gasped, a sudden, profound loneliness hitting him like a physical blow. He forgot, for a terrifying second, the exact timbre of Irika's voice praising him. The memory was there, then it was gone. Stolen. What the hell are you? He screamed, rage and fear mixing into a toxic brew. He unleashed a barrage of tailed beast balls, orbs of condensed annihilation that had leveled mountains. They flew, they struck the gloom, and vanished without a ripple. The maw absorbed them like a sponge absorbs drops of water. The maw spoke. Its voice was not a sound heard by ears, but a vibration felt in the marrow, in the soul. It was the sound of roots cracking ancient tombs, of stars cooling and dying, of the last page of a universe being torn out and burned. Consumption. Return to null. The chakra anomaly terminates. The words parsed in his mind, cold and logical. It wasn't attacking the world. It was attacking chakra itself. The energy of life, of connection, of will, of ninjutsu. The fundamental force of his reality. And Naruto, the child of prophecy, the Jinchuriki, the nexus of chakra, was the biggest, brightest anomaly of all. He was a neon sign in its silent, hungry darkness. A flicker of gold and violent purple to his left. Sasuke. His perfect Susanoo was a majestic, armored giant, but it was cracked like old porcelain, one gigantic wing sheared completely off, leaking shimmering energy. Sakura was on the ground beside its foot, her green medical neem glow a desperate, fragile firefly in the overwhelming gloom. And behind them, held protectively in the shadow of the crippled Susanoo, was a panting, Byakugan flaring Hinata, her stance wide, her palms out, and behind her, Boruto and Himawari. Naruto's heart didn't just stop. It turned to ice and shattered in his chest. Hinata's eyes, those beautiful, lavender pools he'd fallen into 1,000 times, snapped to his. They weren't afraid for herself. They were screaming a warning, a love so vast it was a physical thing in the air, a final, heartbreaking goodbye. Her lips, pale and chapped, formed his name. Naruto. The maw shifted. It seemed to pulse, to sense the dense, tangled web of connection before it, the deep, complicated bond of rivals turned brothers, the fierce, healing love of a teammate, the ferocious, all-consuming love of a mother for her children. It was a feast. A larger tendril, a river of erasure wide enough to swallow a building, detached from its main mass and flowed towards them with silent, grim purpose. No. The scream was torn from two throats as one. Naruto and Sasuke moved in perfect, terrifying synchronicity, a dance forged in a lifetime of rivalry, hatred, understanding, and friendship. Sasuke's remaining Susanoo arm swept out, and Amaterasu bloomed, not as an attack, but as a shield. A wall of creation through destruction, black flames that burned with cold hunger, trying to consume the unconsumable. At the same moment, Naruto poured every ounce of Kurama's and his own chakra into a mega-tailed beast Raisin Shuriken, compressing it until it was a tiny, blinding point of white-hot energy, so bright it seared his own eyes and cast long, stark shadows across the dead valley. The two forces met the river of gray. For one breathtaking, hope-filled moment, light held. The world screamed in conflicting, silent frequencies. Sakura, on the ground, roared and punched the earth with all her might. The ground didn't just crack, it exploded upwards, creating a jagged, earthen canyon wall in an attempt to divert the flow of nullity. Hinata spun, a vision of graceful fury, her gentle fist strikes a blur, creating a delicate, shimmering dome of chakra disruption around the children, a last-ditch effort to scramble the entity's absorption. Boruto had a miniature, sputtering Rasengan in his hand, his face a mask of teenage defiance and sheer terror as he tried to push a crying Himawari behind him. Himawari's small hands were clenched in the fabric of her brother's jacket, her wide eyes not on the monster, but on her father, confused, seeking an explanation he couldn't give. Then, the maw inhaled. It was a suction not of air, but of reality. The Amaterasu winked out of existence, not extinguished, but taken. The raisin shuriken frayed at its edges, its majestic chakra thread snapping and being siphoned away into the gray. Sakura's towering earth wall crumbled to dust, not falling, but unmaking. Hinata's chakra dome flickered and died like a guttered candle. The river of gray didn't break. It enveloped. It touched Sakura first. She didn't scream. There was no sound. She just went utterly, completely still mid-roar, her fist still raised. The vibrant, life-filled pink of her hair faded to the gray of old ash. The fierce, emerald fire in her eyes emptied, becoming calm, dusty marbles that saw nothing. Then, from the point of contact, she crumbled, not to ash, but to a fine, silent powder that was carried into the stream. Sakura. Sasuke's roar was pure, raw, animal agony, the sound of a soul being flayed. He lunged forward, abandoning all defense, his Chidoriya dying, sputtering spark on his hand. The gray tendril wrapped around the Susanoo, and the mighty construct dissolved like sugar in water. It wrapped around Sasuke. The last Uchiha, his epic story of hate and redemption, his pride, his pain, his quiet, hard-won friendship, all of it was quietly, efficiently siphoned away. He looked at Naruto as he dissolved, and for the first time in years, there was no scowl, no arrogance, no annoyance. Just a deep, infinite sorrow. And then, nothing. The tendril reached Hinata and the children. Naruto was moving, a golden comet, but he was running in syrup, in a nightmare. Every fraction of a second stretched into an eternity of horror. He saw Boruto's face, so like his own, set in a determined snarl even as tears cut tracks through the dirt on his cheeks, his tiny Rasengan pushing uselessly against the advancing nothing. He saw Himawari bury her face in Boruto's back, her small shoulders shaking. He saw Hinata. She didn't try to fight. She turned her back to the void, a final, ultimate act of protection. She wrapped her body around their children, her arms encircling them, her head bowed over theirs. Her Byakugan, active to the last, shone with a final, defiant, beautiful light. She looked at him over her shoulder. One last time. And she smiled. It was small. Tender. Full of a love that was absolute and unbreakable. It was a smile that said, "It's okay. I love you. Forever." It shattered him. Consumption. The gray mist washed over them. The light in Hinata's eyes didn't fade, it was deleted, switched off like a monitor. The vibrant lavender turned flat, then dark, then empty. Her body, Boruto's, Himawari's, they didn't fall. They unmade. They came apart at the seams of reality, not with violence, but with a terrible, gentle quiet. They floated apart like dandelion seeds caught in a silent breeze, each particle separating, fading, vanishing into the gray. In less than a second, the space where his family had been was just empty air, colder than the space between stars. Naruto's outstretched hand, fingers splayed, closed on nothing. Just cold, dead air that smelled of ozone and chalk. The world lost its sound. The high-pitched hum vanished. His own heartbeat, a frantic drum in his ears, vanished. He felt, detached. Numb. He felt the immense, roaring sea of chakra within him, Kurama's vast reserves, his own Uzumaki vitality, the gathered energy of nature, being pulled, siphoned towards the maw like water down a drain. Kurama's voice, a constant, grumbling, beloved presence in his mind for half his life, was a distant, fading echo, words stretched and thin. Naruto, kid, run, this is, different, it's, final. The voice flickered, guttered. The familiar, fiery presence in his gut grew cold. No, Naruto whispered. A dry, cracked sound. Then he screamed it. He threw his head back and poured every shred of his being into a raw, unfiltered, primal scream. No. 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 But it wasn't a scream of defiance. It was the sound of a soul being skinned alive, of a universe collapsing inward on a single point of infinite pain. It was the sound of the sun going out. The maw, having consumed the distractions, loomed over him, the final, brightest anomaly. Termination. As the last, largest tendril of nullity reached for his chest, something in Naruto Uzumaki broke. Not his will. His will was a diamond, harder than ever. Something deeper. The seal within him, the 8 trigram sealing style, the one that had held Kurama, the one that was a testament to his mother's sacrifice and his father's love, it shattered. But not from outside pressure. From inside out. The grief was too vast. Too complete. The love he had left, for a village that was gone, for friends turned to dust, for a family erased, had no place to go. It turned inwards, a supernova in a confined space. It fused with the last, fading spark of Kurama's consciousness. It fused with the stolen chakra the Maw had already taken from his clones, from the air, from the very land. And then, in an act of catastrophic blasphemy, it reached out and grabbed the alien, nullifying energy of the void itself, yanking it into the maelstrom within him. It was a nuclear reaction of pure, negative emotion, love with no object, power with no purpose, loss with no end. His blazing chakra cloak inverted. The brilliant, hopeful gold and orange bled away, consumed from the inside out, replaced by a deep, liquid indigo, a color that held no warmth, only the depth of a midnight ocean. Crawling through it were veins of starless black, pulsing like diseased arteries. The whisker marks on his face darkened from blonde to charcoal, then elongated, cutting down his cheeks like grim scars. His shadow, cast by no visible light, stretched out behind him and began to writhe independently, a thing of grasping tendrils. The air around him didn't warm, it grew pregnant and heavy, thick with static and the smell of a coming storm and something else, something metallic and sweet, like ozone and burnt sugar. His hair, usually spiky and wild, lifted slightly, as if he were submerged in water. He looked at the void maw. His eyes were no longer the bright, clear blue of a Konoha sky. They were pools of that same fathomless indigo, with pinpricks of cold, dead white light where his pupils should be. They held no recognition, no anger, no sorrow. Just a terrifying, focused emptiness. "You took," he said. His voice was layered with 100 echoes, a chorus of law speaking as one, his own voice, Kurama's fading growl, a whisper that might have been Minato's, a sigh that could have been Kushina's. "You only know how to take. Now I will show you how to make." He didn't form a hand sign. He didn't need to. He willed. The advancing tendril of nullity, inches from his chest, didn't just stop. It petrified, turning from swirling mist to solid, obsidian-like material in an instant. Then it crystallized further, becoming a jagged, beautiful, and grotesque sculpture of black glass. The crystallization raced back up the tendril towards the Maw's main body with lightning speed, a corruption in reverse. The Maw recoiled. For the first time, it emitted something besides hunger or statement, confusion. A ripple of disordered gray passed through its form. Paradox. Anomaly self-replicates null. Error. "You're not a god," Naruto spoke, his feet leaving the ground as he rose into the heavy air, his inverted cloak dripping motes of dark light that hissed where they hit the ground. "You're just a hole. A zero. Let me show you what creation looks like. It's ugly. It's painful. It's selfish. It's mine." He raised a hand, palm open, towards the entity and the broken world. Beneath them, the valley of the end, the non-water, the gray powder, the shattered remains of the statues, it all shuddered. It wasn't an earthquake. It was reality itself being kneaded. Stone flowed like water, rising and falling in waves. Geography rewrote itself according to a blueprint of grief and madness. From the ruins, spires of impossible architecture thrust upwards, not Konoha's familiar wood and tile, but spiraling towers of obsidian and iridescent pearl, twisted like sea shells, fused with the swirling, whirlpool motif of fallen Yuzushiogakure. A city was being born, beautiful and utterly wrong, a monument to a memory. The Maw shrieked, a sound of tearing metaphysics that made the newborn stones vibrate, and launched its full mass at him, a tidal wave of erasure meant to overwhelm this paradoxical anomaly. Naruto didn't dodge. He dropped his guard. He opened his arms wide, as if to embrace it. He let it all in. The nullifying power of the void flooded into him. It met the bottomless, howling well of his grief-charged chakra. It met the final, fading spark of Kurama's defiant spirit. It met the sensory memory of ramen broth, the phantom touch of a small hand in his, the echo of a laugh, the color of lavender eyes. Inside the crucible of his soul, they fought. They fused. They mutated. He felt his humanity being scoured away, not with pain, but with a terrifying numbness. Cell by cell, memory by memory, it was dissolved in the acid of this new power. He saw his first bowl of ramen with Irika, the steam, the warmth, it blurred, the colors running together. He felt Hinata's hand in his on their wedding day, the sensation of her skin, the pulse in her wrist, it dissolved like mist. He heard Jiraiya's booming, perverted laugh, it faded into distant static, then silence. No. A final, desperate, selfish thought, the last ember of Uzumaki Naruto. Not that. I won't be empty like you. I can't bring them back, but I can find them. I'll build a world where those things still are. I'll make my own echoes. I'll make a home that can't be taken. The fusion within him reached critical mass. There was no explosion of light and force. There was an implosion of reality. A sphere of silent, indigo-black light expanded from Naruto's body. It didn't destroy. It subsumed. It swallowed the maw, not consuming it, but integrating it. It swallowed the broken valley, the dead sky, the very concept of that location. For 1,000 miles in every direction, reality was erased and rewritten, kneaded like clay by a blind, grieving god. When the light receded, the maw was gone. Assimilated. Its power was now his curse. Naruto Uzumaki floated in the center of a newborn, silent, quarter-sized universe. Below him was a perfect, beautiful, wrong replica of a coastal city, Yuzushiogakure as it might have been in a dream, gleaming white and spiraling under a fabricated sun in a sky of perpetual twilight purple. The air smelled of sea salt, ozone, and the faint, cloying sweetness of plum blossoms. It was pristine. It was still. It was empty. He lowered himself to the crest of the tallest obsidian spire, his feet touching the cool, perfectly smooth stone. He looked at his hands. They were pale, unmarked. They looked the same. But they felt vast. Capable of holding galaxies and crushing suns. And inside, he felt shattered. His soul was a pane of glass hit by a hammer, each piece a sharp, reflecting shard of who he was, the lover, the father, the friend, the hero, the orphan, the fool. They rattled against each other in a hollow chest. He was no longer Hokage. That title meant nothing here. He was no longer Jinchuriki. Kurama was gone, his voice a silent, cold spot in Naruto's mind. He was Okami, the tailless beast. The devil of a new dawn. The god of a silent world. A profound, cosmic loneliness descended on him, heavier than any mountain, colder than the deepest space. He had the power to bend reality. He had saved nothing. He had won nothing. The silence was a physical pressure against his eardrums. Then, a whimper. Not a sound. A tiny, psychic echo, a vibration in the newly formed fabric of this pocket reality. It was caught in the moment of the universe's birth, a fossil in the amber of his will. It was the faint, fading imprint of Himawari's giggle, the one she made when he lifted her onto his shoulders. A ghost of a sound, a feeling of weightlessness and joy. It was a spark in the absolute darkness of his being. Naruto's hollow, star-pitted eyes focused on the empty, beautiful city. A terrifying, beautiful idea, a sin against nature, death, and every law of life, bloomed in the fractured landscape of his mind, cold and logical and insane. If he couldn't get them back from the nothing, he would find versions of them. Not here. Not in this dead reality. But in the infinite, branching pathways of the what could have been. He would reach through the walls of dimensions. He would pluck echoes from the multiverse. He would build a sanctuary. A haven. A museum of almost right things. A family of reflections. He would build a harem not of lust, but of profound, desperate, suffocating nostalgia. Each bride would be a piece of the mosaic of the life he lost, a balm for a different, screaming shard of his broken soul. A Hinata to fill the wife-shaped void. A strong kunoichi to fill the comrade-shaped hole. A gentle soul to fill the quiet moments. They would populate his silent city. They would make it feel alive. They would make him feel something. Anything other than this howling vacuum. He looked out over his perfect, empty, waiting city. He raised a hand again, not in violence, but in a gesture of terrible genesis. He focused not on power, but on a memory. Hinata's face. The feel of her chakra, gentle but resilient. Before him, the air a few feet away shimmered. It resisted, like thick oil, then tore. A portal, like a rip in a priceless painting, rippled open. It didn't show the void. It showed a fragment of another world, clear as a window, a secluded Konoha training ground at dusk. A younger Hinata Hyuga, maybe 16, alone, practicing her gentle fist against a wooden post. Her movements were precise, fierce, but her face was streaked with silent tears of frustration and loneliness. This was a Hinata from a branch of reality where Naruto never truly saw her, where the war changed things, where she was strong but unloved. This wasn't his Hinata. This was a stranger. A reflection in a warped mirror. Taking her would be a crime. It would be a theft of a life, a kidnapping of cosmic scale. It would trap her in a gilded cage built from another woman's memory. He knew this. The knowledge was an ice pick in his gut, twisting. The last shard of the boy who wanted to be Hokage screamed in protest. But the silence around him was louder. The void in his chest was hungrier. The memory of that last smile was an open wound that would never heal. A single, black-veined tear of indigo liquid, thick like oil, traced a slow, hot path down his cheek. It hissed where it hit the stone at his feet, leaving a tiny, permanent scorch mark. "Forgive me," he whispered. The words were meant for the Hinata in the portal, for the memory of his wife, for the friends he'd failed, for the universe he was about to violate, for the boy he used to be. His hand, trembling not with weakness, but with the unbearable weight of godhood and guilt, reached through the portal. His fingers, now capable of unmaking worlds, closed gently, carefully, around the wrist of the crying, unsuspecting girl. Her head snapped up, lavender eyes wide with shock and confusion, meeting the star-pitted indigo voids of the devil who had just chosen her. The portal snapped shut. In the silent, beautiful, new city of Yuzushiogakure, a girl's startled gasp was the first sound of its history. And Naruto, the devil, felt the first, faint, agonizing whisper of something other than emptiness. It was the warmth of a living wrist in his hand. It was wrong. It was a crime. It was a beginning. Chapter 2, The First Echo. The silence of the new Yuzushiogakure was not peaceful. It was a held breath. It was the taut stillness of a bowstring after the arrow has been loosed, waiting for a sound that never comes. The air, carrying its scent of salt and synthetic plum, felt thick in the lungs, like breathing in a perfume meant to cover a deeper, unsettling smell. Naruto stood on the polished pearl and obsidian balcony of the central spire, the one he'd begun to think of as the keystone. His new home. His prison. His throne room. The wrist in his hand was warm, delicate, and trembling. Hinata Hyuga, no, a Hinata Hyuga, stumbled forward as the portal behind her vanished with a sound like a suppressed cough. She wrenched her arm back, her Byakugan flaring to life on instinct, veins bulging around her eyes as she took in the impossible vista. Wah! Where is this? Her voice was higher than his Hinata's, edged with a fear that hadn't been sanded down by years of love and war. She saw the spiraling, alien architecture, the twilight sky with its single, stationary sun, the vast, too-still ocean in the distance. Her gaze snapped back to him, to his face. The star-pitted indigo eyes, the dark whisker marks. The Hokage cloak, now a deep, bruised violet instead of orange. Recognition warred with terror. Naruto. What's happened to you? Your chakra, It was wrong. It was cold and deep and tasted like static and burnt sugar when she tried to sense it. It was a void that pulled at her own gentle chakra, making her feel dizzy, exposed. You're safe, Naruto said. The words came out flat, toneless. He'd meant them to be comforting, but they sounded like a statement of fact from a history text. He saw her flinch, her shoulders hunching slightly, a defensive posture he'd seen in his Hinata long ago, before she'd found her strength. This Hinata was still in that before. Safe? From what? Where are we? How did we get here? I was in the training ground, her words tumbled out, panicked. She took a step back, her foot scraping on the flawless stone. The sound was obscenely loud. She looked down, then at her own hands, as if verifying her own reality. This is Yuzushiogakure, he said, gesturing vaguely at the city below. A new one. I built it. You built it? She stared at him, her Byakugan still active, seeing the impossible density of his chakra, the way it seemed woven into the very stones, the air, the fabric of this place. It was like standing inside him. The realization made her stomach lurch. Naruto, your eyes, what's wrong? He didn't answer that. He couldn't. Instead, he focused on the immediate, the practical. A shard of his mind, the part that had once planned missions with Shikamaru, clicked into gear, cold and efficient. You'll have questions. I'll explain. But first, you need a place. Somewhere familiar. He turned and walked through an archway that led into the spire's interior. He didn't look back, but he felt her hesitation, the silent struggle between the urge to run and the terrifying unfamiliarity of this world. After a moment, he heard the soft, hesitant shuffle of her sandals following him. The sound was a tiny anchor in the vast silence. The interior was a paradox. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Light filtered through mother-of-pearl walls, casting soft, rainbow sheens on smooth floors. The air was a perfect, cool temperature. But it was utterly featureless. No furniture. No art. No signs of life. Just graceful, empty halls that echoed their footsteps. It's empty, Hinata whispered, her voice swallowed by the corridor. It's new, he replied, as if that explained everything. He led her to a chamber he had preformatted in his mind. With a thought, the wall at the end of the hall shimmered and reshaped itself, forming a doorway. Beyond it was a near-perfect replica of Hinata's old room in the Hyuga compound. The tatami mats, the low desk, the scroll shelf, the window with its view of a training courtyard. The details were flawless, pulled from his memory with painful precision. Only the view outside the window was wrong, it showed a manicured garden of unfamiliar, glowing blue flowers and a sky that was never quite day. Hinata stopped at the threshold, her breath catching. She stepped inside slowly, her fingers brushing the familiar grain of her desk. She looked at the scrolls, titles she recognized, in her own handwriting. A profound confusion and deeper dread settled on her features. This is my room. But it's not. It can be, Naruto said from the doorway, not entering. Invading this replicated sanctum felt like a step too far. Anything you need. Food, clothes, anything. Just, think of it. The city will provide. She turned to look at him, her Byakugan finally fading, leaving her lavender eyes wide and vulnerable. The city will provide? Naruto, what is this place? What are you? And why am I here? The directness of the last question pierced him. He had rehearsed no lies. There were no convenient missions or threats to blame. There was only the truth, monstrous in its simplicity. My world ended, he said, his voice still that terrible, flat calm. Everyone died. Hinata, my Hinata. My children. Sasuke. Sakura. Everyone. A thing called the Void Maw consumed them. It took everything. Her hand flew to her mouth. The horror in her eyes was genuine, immediate. She was a kunoichi, she understood loss. But the scale. I'm so sorry, Naruto. That's unimaginable. Her innate compassion surfaced, momentarily overriding her own fear. She took a step towards him. I stopped it, he continued, as if he hadn't heard her. I used its own power. I fused with it. And I made this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing the room, the spire, the universe. A new place. A safe place. Her compassion faltered, logic reasserting itself. But, why bring me here? I'm not her. The words were a whisper, a confession and an accusation. He finally met her gaze. The pinprick stars in his indigo eyes seemed to swirl slowly. I know. The admission cost him. It was the first crack in the dam of his delusion. You are a Hinata Hyuga from a different path. A world where things happen differently. You are not my wife. But you are, a piece of the pattern. Your presence here, it helps quiet the silence. He saw the understanding dawn in her eyes, and with it, a cold, creeping horror that was worse than her initial fear. It wasn't just kidnapping. It was curation. She was a replacement part, a salve for his madness. You brought me here, to replace her? The tremor was gone from her voice, replaced by a thin, sharp edge. No. The word burst from him, too loud, echoing in the fake room. The first real emotion he'd shown, defensive, desperate anger. He mastered it instantly, the void swallowing the heat. Not to replace. To remind. To make this place feel less like a tomb. So I am a decoration, she said, her voice quiet and deadly. A living memorial. He had no answer. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I want to go home, she said, each word precise. You can't. Why not? The pathway is one way. And your world, it's a thread. Pulling you out caused a disturbance. Going back could unravel things. This was a half-truth, a justification born of his need. The real reason was simpler, he couldn't bear the emptiness her leaving would recreate. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness now, but of furious, trapped frustration. You had no right. I had no choice, he whispered, and in that moment, he believed it. She turned her back on him, facing the false window, her shoulders rigid. Get out. He left. The doorway sealed itself silently behind him, leaving her in her perfect, gilded cage. The next days were a slow, cold war. Naruto stayed away from her chamber, but he was agonizingly aware of her. The city was an extension of his senses. He felt her pacing, the frantic flutter of her chakra as she tried everything, gentle fist strikes on the walls, which absorbed the energy without a mark, attempts to find the limits of her room. The hallway outside now led only to a serene, walled garden with a real sky, but no exit, her silent crying at night. He tried to provide. A tray of food would appear in her room, not ration bars, but a perfect replication of the Hyuga clan's delicate cuisine. Fresh clothes, identical to her own, would be folded on the desk. A new, non-fiction scroll about advanced chakra theory, a subject he remembered his Hinata had enjoyed, materialized on her shelf. She ignored most of it. She ate sparingly. She wore the clothes because she had to. The scroll went unread. The silence between them was a living thing. Finally, on the fourth day, she emerged into the garden. Naruto, who had been standing immobile on a higher balcony, watching the static ocean, felt her step into the open air. He descended, not with a shunshin, but by the stairs, giving her time. He found her sitting on a bench of white stone, staring at the glowing blue flowers. They emitted a soft, sourceless light and a faint, melancholic scent. She didn't look at him as he approached. "They're called Memory's Lament," he said, his voice quiet. "I didn't name them. The city suggested it." "They're not real," she said, not turning. "They are here. They grow. They have cells, chlorophyll of a sort. They're as real as anything else." "Why is the sky that color?" "I don't know. It felt right." She finally looked at him. The anger was still there, banked like coals, but under it was a profound exhaustion and a dawning, grim curiosity. "You really are a god here, aren't you?" "I'm just a man who broke the world and tried to glue it back together with the wrong pieces." It was the most honest thing he'd said since her arrival. It seemed to disarm her slightly. "What happens now?" she asked. "Do I just live in this room and garden forever? Do you expect me to be with you? To pretend?" The question hung in the perfumed air. A direct hit. "No," he said, and meant it. The thought of touching her, this stranger wearing his wife's face, filled him with a nausea that was uniquely horrible. "I expect nothing from you. Your presence is enough." It sounded pathetic, even to him. "My presence is a prison sentence for a crime I didn't commit." He had no rebuttal. He sat on the far end of the bench, leaving a vast space between them. The distance felt continental. "Tell me about her," Hinata said suddenly, her gaze fixed on the flowers. "You're Hinata." He went very still. "Why?" "Because I need to understand the ghost I'm supposed to be haunting. And you look like you need to say her name." The insight was so sharp, so painfully accurate, it stole his breath. This Hinata, this younger, less confident version, had a perceptiveness born of a different kind of loneliness. She was an observer. So he talked. Haltingly at first, then in a slow, relentless stream. He didn't talk about the epic moments, the war, the battles. He talked about the small things. The way his Hinata would hum off-key while tending her garden. The specific furrow in her brow when she was trying to decipher one of Boruto's incomprehensible new gadgets. The feel of her head on his shoulder after a long day, her hair tickling his chin. The sound of her laughter when Himawari painted his face with her brushes. As he spoke, he didn't look at the girl beside him. He looked at his hands, at the fake sky. His flat voice gained texture, cracking in places, fading to a whisper in others. Indigo tears, thick and silent, traced their familiar, scorching paths down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. The Hinata beside him listened. She didn't interrupt. She just absorbed the portrait of a life, a love, a woman who was her and yet was fundamentally not her. She heard the strength, the quiet certainty, the deep, anchored love that her own heart yearned for but hadn't yet found. She heard about a version of herself who was complete. When he finally fell silent, the twilight seemed a shade darker. The glowing flowers pulsed softly. "She sounds amazing," the Hinata on the bench said softly, and her voice held no jealousy, only a wistful, aching sadness. "I'm sorry I'm not her." "I'm sorry I took you from wherever you were supposed to be," he replied. It was an apology, the first he'd offered. She nodded, a small, tight movement. "What was it like? Your world, ending?" He described the void maw. Not the fight, but the sensation. The sound of the hum. The smell of ozone and chalk. The way memories were stolen. The unbearable silence after. The way Sakura and Sasuke vanished. The way his family, unmade. As he spoke of the final moment, of the smile, his voice broke completely. He bent forward, his elbows on his knees, his face in his hands. His shoulders did not shake with sobs. He was beyond that. He simply sat, folded in on himself, a monument to grief made flesh. He felt a touch. Light, hesitant. Fingers brushing his arm, just above the wrist. He flinched, a violent, involuntary recoil, as if burned. He looked up, startled. The Hinata beside him had her hand outstretched, her expression a complex map of pity, fear, and a stubborn, innate kindness that no dimension could erase. I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling her hand back. "I shouldn't have." "No," he said, his voice raw. It's all right." He was lying. The touch, so familiar yet so alien, had sent a lightning bolt of agony and longing through him. It was a reminder of what was lost and the pale imitation he had stolen. But it was also the first human contact in this new eternity. And despite the pain, a tiny, shattered part of him screamed for more. "I won't pretend," she said, her voice firming. "I won't call you darling or act like her. I can't. My name is Hinata. You can call me that. But I am not your wife." "I understand," he said. "And I want a purpose. I am a kunoichi of the Hyuga clan, even here. I will not be a bird in a cage. If this is my world now, I will explore it. I will train. I will find a way to be useful. On my own terms." It was a declaration of independence within her prison. A negotiation. He saw the steel in her, the same steel that had always been in his Hinata, waiting to be tempered. This one was tempering it against him. "Okay," he agreed. It was a relief. A purpose for her was a structure for him. "The city is yours to explore. It's safe. There's nothing that can hurt you here. Except me," he didn't add. She stood up, smoothing the skirts of her replicated kimono. "Then I'll start tomorrow." She paused, looking down at him, this broken god on a bench. "The food. It's very accurate. Thank you." It was a small, staggering peace offering. A recognition of his effort, if not his right. He just nodded, unable to speak. She turned and walked back towards her chamber, her steps quieter now, less desperate. She stopped at the archway without looking back. "Good night, Naruto." The name, spoken without title, without endearment, without hatred, just a simple acknowledgement of his existence, echoed in the garden long after she had gone inside. Naruto sat on the bench as the fabricated stars began to appear in the purple sky. The silence was still there, the vast, cosmic loneliness. But it was different now. It was no longer absolute. It was now inhabited by another heartbeat, another set of breaths, a consciousness that was not his own. He had planted the first echo in his silent world. It had taken root. It was angry, sad, and unwilling to play the role he had, in his heart, assigned it. But it was alive. He looked at the spot on his arm where her fingers had brushed. The skin still tingled. He curled his hand into a fist, the god who could shape matter, who had consumed a void, trying to hold on to the phantom warmth of a stolen girl's touch. The first chapter of his haunted, tragic harem had begun. Not with passion, but with pity. Not with love, but with a profound, shared loneliness. And as he sat there, he knew, with a certainty that chilled his stolen bones, that the next echo he called would not be so gentle. The city hungered for more life, and the shattered shards of his soul were already whispering, pulling him towards another memory, another face, another desperate attempt to fill the unfillable void. In the garden, a memory's lament flower, brushed by Hinata's passing, shed a single, glowing blue petal. It drifted slowly to the perfect white stone path, where it lay like a fallen piece of a sad, artificial sky. Chapter 3, Stone and Silk. The problem with being a god, Naruto was discovering, was the sheer, mind-numbing boredom of it. Creation, when willed into existence with a thought, lacked texture. There was no struggle, no triumph over materials, no satisfying heft of a chisel or smell of sawdust. Yuzushio was a finished symphony playing on an endless loop in a hall with only one listener. Hinata's presence had disrupted the silence, but it had also highlighted the emptiness between them. The vast, echoing corridors of the Keystone Spire felt more like a mausoleum than ever. The fractured shards of his psyche were growing restless. The protector shard screamed for defenses, for purpose. The comrade shard ached for banter, for an equal, for someone who wouldn't look at him with pity or terror. His gaze kept drifting from the serene, fake ocean to the jagged, mountainous region he'd formed to the north, a place of raw, unfinished rock and simulated geothermal vents. It felt active. It felt like a place for someone with fire in their blood. He didn't summon a portal this time. The process with Hinata had been too intimate, too wounding. Instead, he reached. He stretched his consciousness, a tendril of indigo will, through the walls of reality, not seeking a specific person, but a specific frequency, earth-deep chakra, stubborn pride, a temperament like grinding tectonic plates. He sought not a memory of love, but a memory of rivalry. Of someone who had stood opposite him, not as an enemy, but as a wall to be scaled. His search snagged on a world where the Fourth Great Ninja War's aftermath was different. A world of harsh treaties and colder peace. A world where a certain Tsuchikage fought not for dreams, but for the sheer, gritty survival of her village. He focused, and the air in the throne room of the Keystone Spire, a vast, circular chamber he'd finally furnished with a single, obsidian chair, rippled like heat haze. A figure coalesced from swirling dust and hard light, stumbling forward onto the smooth floor with a grunt of surprise. Kuratsuchi. But not the one he knew. This one was younger, perhaps only a few years into her reign as the fourth Tsuchikage. She wore the standard grey flak jacket over a dark red dress, her hair in its severe, pointed style. There was no trace of the weary, semi-amused pragmatist he'd shared post-war summits with. This woman's dark eyes were chips of flint, her posture a live wire of tension. She smelled of ozone, stone dust, and the sharp, clean sweat of recent exertion. She took in the impossible architecture in a single, sweeping glance, her body coiling into a combat stance before her feet had fully found their balance. Her gaze locked onto him, sitting on his dark throne. Uzumaki, she spat, the name an accusation. What is this? A genjutsu? Some Konoha trick? Her voice was a low, gravelly alto, hardened by command and suspicion. No trick, Naruto said, rising. He kept his movements slow, non-threatening. Welcome to Uzushio. Uzushio is rubble at the bottom of the ocean, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. Where are we? And what the hell have you done to yourself? You look like you bathed in a chakra reactor's waste. A grim, almost smile touched his lips. This was already different. Hinata had been frightened, then pitying. Kuratsuchi was just pissed. It was refreshing. Long story. The short version is, my world ended. I made a new one. You're in it. She didn't waste time on horror or sympathy. Her mind, trained in the ruthless calculus of Iwagakure, went straight to tactics. Kidnapping. A hostage play. My village will not negotiate for me. You've wasted your effort, Konoha. She emphasized the last word, a deliberate reminder of old enmities. This isn't about Iwagakure, he said, taking a step forward. This isn't about villages at all. Not anymore. Then it's about you, she deduced, her eyes flicking around the chamber, looking for exits, weaknesses. This place, it feels like you. It stinks of your chakra. It's in the stone. She placed a hand on a nearby pearl-inlaid column. Her earth-nature senses, far more acute than Hinata's, were reading the truth of it. You've infused yourself into the environment. A permanent, large-scale hijitsu. Madness. Necessity, he corrected, but the word sounded weak. Bullshit. She dropped her hand, facing him fully. You're a god in a sandbox. And you pulled me in to be a toy. What's the play, Uzumaki? You want to fight? You want to prove your new power by breaking the Tsuchikage? A fierce, challenging light ignited in her eyes. Despite the impossible situation, the prospect of a fight seemed to ground her. The comrade shard within him stirred, responding to the challenge. The protector shard saw a warrior who could help fortify this world. But the overarching, grieving architect just saw another piece for his mosaic. A piece of stone to contrast Hinata's silk. I don't want to break you, he said honestly. I want you to stay. To live here. She barked a short, humorless laugh. Live here? In your pretty, dead dollhouse? As what? Your prisoner? Your pet? As a citizen. A resident. The word bride stuck in his throat. It was unthinkable with this woman. I am the Tsuchikage, she said, drawing herself up, and the title held real weight, real authority here. My citizens are under the rock of Iwa. My duty is there. Send me back. Now. I can't. You mean you won't? The pathways are unstable. Your world, the thread I pulled you from was fraying. A civil war, wasn't it? Over the new mining rights in the Valley of Hell? He saw her flinch, a micro-expression of shock. His dimensional reach had given him flashes of her context. You were about to be ambushed by your own council's Black Ops team. I didn't take you from peace, Kuratsuchi. I took you from a death sentence. Her jaw tightened. The truth of his words hit home. She had suspected the betrayal, but hadn't expected it so soon. For a moment, raw, bitter calculation flickered across her face. Was this bizarre captivity better than a knife in the dark from a supposed ally? The calculation passed, replaced by renewed defiance. Then I'll die on my feet, in my world, fighting for it. Not sitting in a cage in yours. So either send me back to my fight, or give me one here. She brought her hands together in a familiar seal. Doton, Iwa no Bunshin. 3 rock clones, gritty and realistic, erupted from the flawless floor beside her and charged him. It was a test, a probe. Naruto didn't move. He didn't raise a hand. As the clones came within 10 feet of him, the air itself thickened, becoming like clear gel. They slowed, their movements grinding to a halt as if trapped in hardening cement. Then, the floor beneath them opened, not into a pit, but into a mouth of shimmering, indigo energy. It swallowed the clones silently, and the floor sealed seamlessly again, leaving no mark. Kuratsuchi's eyes widened. That was no ninjutsu she recognized. No hand signs, no visible chakra expenditure. It was as if the world itself obeyed him. Fighting me here is like fighting the concept of gravity, he said, his voice still calm. You can't win. But I'm not your enemy. Anyone who isn't for my people is my enemy, she retorted, but her hands lowered slightly. The sheer, effortless display of power had its intended effect. Direct assault was futile. She was a strategist. She would adapt. So. I'm stuck. What are the rules of this residency? Explore. Train. Do what you wish. The northern mountains might feel familiar. The city will provide anything material you need. And what do you get out of this? She asked, her gaze piercing. You don't strike me as a charitable deity. He hesitated. The silence was loud. Your presence makes it less so. So I'm noise pollution, she said dryly. A grim humor, but humor nonetheless. Fine. I'll be your noisy prisoner. But I have conditions. He almost smiled. Conditions? I want a workshop. A proper one, not a pretty room. Stone, forge, tools. Materials that obey the actual laws of physics, not your whims. If I'm to be your resident blacksmith or whatever, I need to work with real things. It was a brilliant move. A demand for something real, something outside his absolute control, a piece of her old world to anchor her. He considered, then nodded. You can build it yourself. In the mountains. The raw materials there are, consistent. They'll behave as stone and metal should. I won't interfere. Second, she said, stepping closer, her eyes locked on his star-pitted ones. You stay out of my way. I don't want to see you unless it's absolutely necessary. I am not here for your amusement or your companionship. That one stung, but he nodded again. Agreed. Third. The other one. The Hyuga girl I can sense in the East Wing. She's a prisoner too. Her name is Hinata. She is, adjusting. Kuratsuchi's mouth twisted. Right. Well, my interactions with her are my own business. Not part of your collection dynamics. There are no dynamics, he said, a flare of irritation in his flat voice. Sure there aren't, she said, the sarcasm thick enough to cut. You just collect powerful kunoichi from across dimensions for the interior decorating. I've met men with less obvious motivations. She turned on her heel, already striding towards the archway that led out. I'll find these mountains myself. Don't follow me. And she was gone, her footsteps sharp and angry on the pearl floor, fading as she descended the spire. Naruto gave her 2 days. The silence she left in her wake was different, not empty, but charged, like the air after a lightning strike. He tracked her progress through the city's senses. She moved with purpose, a predator mapping new territory. She found the mountains, a region he'd left intentionally rough and mineral-rich. He felt the first, real, non-manufactured vibrations as she used her earth release to carve a cavern into a cliff face. The sound of real rock cracking was a symphony. On the 3rd day, he went to see Hinata. He found her not in her garden, but in a new space, a simple, open-air training ground she had apparently requested from the city. It was a flat expanse of packed earth with wooden posts and targets. She was a blur of motion, practicing the 8 trigram 64 palms. Her form was impeccable, her strikes creating a low whoosh thump in the air. She saw him and finished her sequence, coming to a rest, barely winded. A light sheen of real sweat glowed on her forehead. Naruto, she greeted, her tone neutral. It was their new normal. You've been training hard. A kunoichi must maintain her skills, she said, repeating her declaration. She tilted her head. There's someone new. In the mountains. Her chakra feels, like grinding stone. Kuratsuchi. The Tsuchikage. From another world. Hinata absorbed this. Is she, like me? No. She's not like you at all. A strange, almost amused glint appeared in Hinata's eye. I can sense that too. She's very angry. She has reason to be. Hinata was silent for a moment, watching him. Are you going to bring more? The question was inevitable. The city feels like it needs more anchors. To be stable. It was a half-truth. He was the unstable one. I see. Hinata picked up a towel that had appeared on a nearby bench and wiped her face. She might be good for you. He blinked, startled. What? She isn't afraid of you. Not in the same way. She's angry at you. That's a real emotion. It's better than this. She gestured vaguely between them, at the polite, painful distance. And you need someone who isn't a ghost to talk to. Even if it's just to argue. Before he could process that, a distant, but distinct boom echoed from the northern mountains, followed by a rumble. Not a collapse, a controlled, powerful explosion. Hinata's Byakugan activated instantly, her gaze snapping north. She just vaporized a significant portion of a cliff face. Earth release, highly condensed. She's smiling? Curiosity, a feeling so long absent it felt alien, stirred in Naruto. I should go. To ensure she's not damaging the structural integrity. Hinata gave him a look that was far too perceptive. Of course. Structural integrity. She went back to her kata, a small, private smile on her lips. He found Kuratsuchi standing in a cloud of settling dust at the mouth of a newly excavated cave. The cliff face now featured a wide, geometrically precise archway leading into a deep, dark space. Piles of neatly cut stone blocks lay around her. She was covered in a fine gray powder, her arms bare and muscular. In her hands, she held not a tool, but a molten, glowing orb of rock she was shaping with her chakra alone, her face a mask of intense, focused satisfaction. She sensed him and let the orb fall into a waiting stone mold, where it solidified with a hiss. I thought I said not to come. I felt an explosion. That was me mining. Efficiently. She gestured with a dusty thumb into the cave. The interior framework is done. Needs fittings. Your city provided a basic anvil and bellows, but the quality is suspiciously perfect. I'll have to break them in. He stepped closer, peering into the gloom. She had created a vast, vaulted space. It was utilitarian, beautiful in its sheer functionality. The air smelled of hot stone, metal, and honest labor. It was the most real place in all of Uzushio. You built this in 3 days? I'm the Tsuchikage. Moving earth is what I do. She wiped her hands on her trousers, leaving streaks. It's not a palace. It's a workshop. A forge. Maybe an arsenal. She looked at him, a challenging gleam in her eye. If I'm to be stuck here, I might as well be useful. Your pretty city has no teeth. If something ever comes knocking from whatever void you crawled out of, you'll want something harder than mother of pearl to hit it with. That the protector shard within him sang. She was already thinking of defense, of practicalities. Not as his bride, but as a general surveying a new fortress. That's a good idea, he admitted. I have those occasionally. She picked up a rough-hewn hammer and tested its weight. The Hyuga girl. She's quiet. Skilled, from what my seismic sense picks up. Is she part of this defense plan of yours? Or just decoration? She is her own person, Naruto said, a defensive edge returning. She trains for herself. Good. Maybe I'll have her over. See if her gentle fist can shatter my harder constructs. Could be useful data. It was said with complete clinical detachment. Kuratsuchi, it seemed, was adapting by treating this entire situation as a long-term, bizarre deployment. She turned back to her forge, effectively dismissing him. You can go now, Uzumaki. I have work to do. Unless you want to learn to smith? I could use a striker with supernatural strength. The offer, casual and practical, was another staggering moment. It wasn't an offer of friendship. It was an offer of utility. To him, it was a lifeline. Maybe, he heard himself say. Another time. As he turned to leave, she spoke again, her voice softer, almost lost in the echo of the cave. The silence here, it is loud. I hear it too. The rock usually speaks to me. Here, it just obeys. It's wrong. He stopped, not looking back. I know. Your solution is to fill it with people. It won't work. You can't fill a bottomless pit with stones. You'll just keep throwing them in, and they'll keep falling, and you'll never hear them hit bottom. Her words were like a physical blow, so accurate they stole his breath. What's your solution? He asked, his voice barely audible. You learn to live with the echo, she said, and he heard the strike of her hammer on hot metal, a sharp, lonely, definitive clang. You don't try to drown it out. You listen to it, until it becomes a part of the landscape. Until it's just the wind. He had no answer to that. He left her to her forge, the sound of her hammer ringing through the stone, a real, honest noise in his false world. A sound of creation that required effort. A sound of defiance. He walked back to his silent spire, Kuratsuchi's words echoing louder than any hammer strike. You'll never hear them hit bottom. He looked at the perfect, sleeping city. He looked towards the east wing, where Hinata's gentle chakra pulsed like a quiet heartbeat. He looked north, to the mountains where a furious, practical woman was building a real thing with her own hands. He had two echoes now. One of silk, one of stone. They were not what he had lost. They were not what he wanted. But as he stood there, the master of all he surveyed, he felt the first, faint, terrifying tug of something new. Not just the need to fill silence, but a flicker of interest in the people who were filling it. In their anger, their resilience, their quiet observations. The Devil's Harem was not a place of pleasure. It was a workshop, a training ground, a laboratory for a broken heart. And his next acquisition, he knew with dread certainty as he felt another lonely shard within him cry out, would be even more complicated. The shard that missed laughter, missed irreverence, missed a certain chaotic, paper-filled grace. He had started a gathering. And the pieces were beginning, against all his intentions, to talk to each other. Chapter 4, The Gardener of Souls. The Keystone Spire had a basement. Naruto hadn't built it, it had grown. Like a calcified root from a diseased tooth, it had descended from the foundations of his throne room, spiraling down into the bedrock of his fabricated world. This was where the business of being a god got messy. This was the engine room, the womb, the wound. He called it the Soul Grove. It was not a place for guests. Hinata, with her gentle curiosity, would have been horrified. Kuratsuchi, with her pragmatic earth sense, would have called it an abomination. So he came here alone, in the dead hours when his two residents slept, or in Kuratsuchi's case, muttered over blueprints in her forge-lit cave. The air in the grove was thick, humid, and carried a scent that made his stolen senses recoil, the cloying sweetness of overripe fruit undercut by the sharp, metallic tang of ozone and fresh-turned earth. It was the smell of life and lightning forced into a closed system. The walls were not stone, but a pulsating, fibrous material that glowed with a soft, internal bioluminescence, like the gills of a deep-sea fungus. Veins of his indigo-black chakra pulsed through them, a slow, sickly heartbeat. And from these walls, from the ceiling, from strange, bulbous growths on the floor, bloomed the flowers. They were not like memory's lament in Hinata's garden. These were grotesque, beautiful things. Each was a manifestation of a potential reality, a thread he had sensed in the multiverse. They grew in slow, dreamlike time-lapse. A bud would form, swell, and over days or weeks, unfurl into a shimmering, petal-like portal showing a frozen moment from another world. The images were silent, crystal clear, and heartbreakingly mundane. A petal showing a street in a rainy Kiri, where a young man with a bandaged face bought tomatoes. A petal showing a sun-drenched training field in Suna, where a boy with gourd on his back napped under a scorpion's shadow. A petal showing an academy classroom in Konoha, where a pink-haired girl waved her hand frantically, desperate to answer a question. They were all potential echoes. Potential pieces for his silent mosaic. Tending them was a delicate, draining task. It required him to sit cross-legged in the center of the grove, his consciousness expanding to touch each bloom. He didn't control their growth. He merely nurtured. He fed them whispers of chakra, not his void-touched power, but purified streams he painstakingly filtered, trying to mimic the natural energy of a living world. He was a gardener growing ghosts. Tonight, his focus was on a particularly stubborn bud. It was larger than the others, a tight fist of iridescent white and unhealthy-looking violet veins. It resonated with a frequency that was painfully familiar, medicinal sharpness, underlying ferocity, the scent of cherry blossoms and antiseptic. Sakura. But not his Sakura. This was a potential Sakura from a branch where things had gone differently. A branch where Sasuke had stayed in Konoha, where Team 7 had never truly fractured. The bud pulsed with a potent, tangled energy of loyalty, frustration, and unfulfilled potential. It was a strong thread. A tempting one. The comrade shard within him ached. He missed her blunt honesty, her terrifying strength, the way she'd smack sense into him and Sasuke. This Sakura bloom could be that. A piece of his old team. A voice of reason, a healer for this broken world, a friend. He extended a tendril of his will, carefully channeling a stream of neutral chakra towards the bud. Grow, he whispered, not with command, but with pleading. Show me. The bud shuddered. The violet veins darkened, throbbing. The image within the tightening petals flickered, a hospital corridor, Sakura in a medicine jacket, her face weary but determined, carrying a stack of scrolls. Then it blurred, shifted. A training ground, her fist cratering the earth, her green eyes blazing with tears of frustration. The images were unstable. He poured more chakra, gentle, coaxing. The bud swelled, the petals beginning to peel back. The scent of cherry blossoms grew stronger, overwhelming the grove's morbid sweetness. A feeling of immense, focused will began to emanate from it. And then, it went wrong. A crack, silent but felt in his bones, split the side of the bud. From the crack oozed not sap, but a thick, black, tarry substance that smoked where it dripped onto the fibrous floor, burning tiny holes. The image within the unfolding petals distorted. Sakura's face melted, her features running like wet clay, reforming into a silent scream. The green of her eyes bleached to a sickly white. The cherry blossom scent curdled into the smell of rotting meat and formaldehyde. Mistake. The word wasn't heard, it was injected directly into his mind, cold and alien. It was the voice of the void maw, a remnant, a cancer in his power. The corrupted bloom pulsed, and a wave of psychic feedback slammed into Naruto. Not pain, but memory. Not his memory. The feel of a scalpel in her hand, precise and sure, the sound of a heartbeat monitor flatlining, the sight of Ino's blonde hair splayed on a pillow, pale and lifeless, the crushing weight of failure, of being the world's greatest medic who couldn't save her best friend. A cold decision: if she couldn't save, she would preserve. Forever, the chill of the morgue, the hum of stasis seals, the peaceful, frozen face of. Naruto recoiled, severing the chakra flow with a gasp. He stumbled back, his indigo eyes wide. The corrupted Sakura bloom wasn't a healer. It was a mortician. A Sakura from a world where loss had twisted her healing art into a ghastly necromancy, a desperate attempt to freeze time and deny death. This was the horror of his gardening. He couldn't see the full story, only the resonant frequency. He could summon the echo, but not control the scars it carried. The corrupted bloom, denied his nurturing chakra, began to wither. The black tar solidified. The petals crumpled inward with a sound like crumpling parchment. The image of the screaming, white-eyed Sakura faded. In moments, it was a desiccated, black husk, clinging to the wall. He stood there, breathing heavily, the phantom smells of rot and antiseptic clinging to him. This was his sin. This was the cost. Every bloom was a life, a story, with its own tragedies. To pluck one was to rip it from its context, to possibly spare it one pain only to imprison it in another. Fascinating. And deeply unsettling. The voice, dry and observational, came from the entrance to the grove. A place that had no entrance. Naruto whirled, his chakra flaring defensively, the grove's walls pulsing in angry indigo. Standing in the archway he had not formed was a man. Tall, lean, wearing a standard Konoha Jonin vest over dark clothes, a hitayate slanting over one eye, and a mask covering the lower half of his face. A shock of silver hair was unmistakable. Kakashi Hatake. But not his Kakashi. This one single visible eye wasn't lazy or distracted. It was sharp, analytical, and held a depth of weary horror that was instantly familiar. He held a small, glowing green scroll in one hand, a dimensional anchor, now fizzling out. He'd clearly used a forbidden, experimental fuinjutsu to track the disturbance Naruto's plucking of Hinata and Kuratsuchi had caused. I did wonder where all the ambient chakra was draining to, this Kakashi said, his eye taking in the grove, the blooms, the withered black husk of the sakura flower. His gaze lingered on Naruto, on the star-pitted eyes, the dark whiskers, the aura of wrongness. There was no recognition, only a clinical assessment of a major threat. You've been busy, haven't you? Creating your own little ecosystem of stolen moments. What are you doing here? Naruto's voice was a low growl, the echoes layered with threat. This was an intrusion. A violation of his one sacred, horrific space. Following a trail of tears in reality, Kakashi said casually, pocketing the spent scroll. He took a step forward, his sandal sinking slightly into the soft, fibrous floor. He didn't flinch. My world has been experiencing ripples. Weak spots. People reporting déjà vu of lives they never lived. I traced the epicenter to a non-location. And here I am. He looked at a nearby bloom showing a young guy in leg weights. This is a profound violation, you know. Of nature. Of destiny. Of basic decency. You don't understand, Naruto said, the defensiveness of a child caught in a terrible act creeping into his god voice. I understand enough, Kakashi said, his eye finally meeting Naruto's. You lost everything. So you decided to become a dragon, hoarding shiny pieces of other people's everythings. Classic tragedy. Poorly written, but classic. The sarcasm was a shield, but Naruto could see the real anger, the disgust, beneath it. This was a man who had lived with loss his whole life and had never, ever considered this as an option. I'm giving them a better life. The words burst out, pathetic and hollow even to his own ears. Are you? Kakashi gestured to the withered sakura bloom. Did you ask that one if it wanted a better life? Or did you just see sakura and reach, without caring about the rot inside? He walked slowly along the edge of the grove, observing the other flowers. You're not a gardener. You're a collector pressing flowers in a book. You're flattening them, killing the context that makes them who they are. The Hyuga girl up there, she's not your wife. She's a refugee from her own destiny. The Iwa Kunoichi in the mountains, she's a general without an army. You haven't saved them. You've made them ghosts in your machine. Each word was a scalpel, precise and cold. This was Kakashi's true power, Naruto realized, not the Sharingan, but the ruthless, unflinching dissection of truth. Why are you here? Naruto repeated, power gathering in his palms, indigo light bleeding into the humid air. To judge me? To stop me? To observe, Kakashi said, stopping and turning to face him fully. And to warn you. You're not just stealing people. You're punching holes in the walls between worlds. My team detected the breaches. We're not the only ones who can. There are things, out there, that look for holes. Things that make your void maw look like a stray puppy. You're setting a dinner bell, and you're the main course. He paused, his eye softening infinitesimally. And you're hurting, Naruto. I can see it. Even like, this. Stop this. Let these people go. Close this place down. Grieve. Then die, like the rest of us have to. The use of his name, spoken not with affection but with a brutal, pitying finality, was the worst cut of all. I can't, Naruto whispered. The silence. The silence is what you have earned, Kakashi said, his voice dropping to a deadly serious whisper. It's the cost of living, and the cost of loving. You don't get to cheat it by building a haunted house. He looked up at the grove's pulsing ceiling. This place is a tomb pretending to be a womb. It's already dying. Can't you feel it? It's feeding on you, and you're feeding on stolen lives. It's a closed loop of despair. The flowers will start to wilt. The people will start to remember, or worse, forget. And you'll be left with nothing but the echo of your own mistake. He reached into his vest and pulled out another scroll, this one pulsing with a dangerous silver light. I can't destroy this place. Not yet. The collateral would be extreme. But I'm marking it. My world will be watching. And if you reach for another bloom. He met Naruto's gaze. I'll consider the person you were to be truly dead, and I'll bring an army to put this rabid god down. He unfurled the scroll. Space around him twisted. Wait. Naruto took a step forward, a hand outstretched. Not to attack. It was a plea. Kakashi-sensei. The single visible eye crinkled, not in a smile, but in profound sadness. I'm not your sensei, boy. I'm just a ghost who followed the scent of blood in the water. Goodbye. The Fuinjutsu flared. With a sound like a sucked-in breath, Kakashi Hatake was gone. Only the faint, fading scent of ozone and old paper remained. Naruto stood alone in the Soul Grove. The silence Kakashi had spoken of descended, but it was different now. It was no longer just the absence of sound. It was informed. It was pregnant with judgment, with warning, with the specter of an external threat. He looked at his hands, at the indigo energy crackling faintly around them. He looked at the beautiful, terrible flowers. He looked at the blackened husk of the sakura that never was. You're setting a dinner bell. A closed loop of despair. A tomb pretending to be a womb. Kakashi's words coiled in his mind, venomous and true. He walked to the withered sakura bloom and gently, with a touch far more tender than his godhood should allow, plucked it from the wall. It crumbled to ash in his palm. He closed his fist, feeling the grit. He was a gardener of souls. And his garden was growing poisoned fruit. The next flower he was drawn to, a shimmering, azure bloom that resonated with calm, papery grace and the smell of rain, seemed to pulse invitingly. Conan. A piece of a different pain, a different kind of loyalty. He wanted to reach for it. The lonely shard that missed peaceful companionship cried out. But Kakashi's warning echoed. And the memory of the corrupted Sakura lingered. For the first time since his ascension, Naruto, the devil of Uzushio, hesitated. He turned and left the Soul Grove, the pulsing walls sealing behind him. The perfect, silent corridors of the spire felt more alien than ever. He climbed to the highest balcony, looking out over his city. To the east, Hinata's gentle chakra was a steady, sleeping ember. To the north, Kuratsuchi's forge was dark, but the mountain itself held her stubborn, awake presence, and somewhere in the spaces between, a silver-haired ghost was watching. He had built a harem to quiet the silence. But he had only succeeded in filling it with sharper, more complicated noises, the whisper of silk, the clash of stone, the rustle of warning scrolls, and the silent scream of a bloom that should never have been. The gardening, he realized with a cold that seeped into his stolen bones, was only getting harder. Chapter 5, The Uninvited Guest. Hinata's improvement was measurable. Not in power, though her gentle fist had gained a fierce, desperate edge, but in territory. She had claimed the eastern quarter of the Silent City. She'd convinced, or perhaps the city had simply acquiesced to her quiet will, a sector of buildings to reshape themselves into something resembling a quiet Hyuga compound annex, clean lines, wooden walkways, raked sand gardens. She'd even managed to coax a small, real koi pond into existence, the fish appearing one day as if they'd always been there, their orange and white flashes the only spontaneous movement in Yuzushio. She was sitting by this pond, trailing her fingers in the cool water, when the world hiccuped. It wasn't a sound or a tremor. It was a lurch in the texture of reality. The air went thin and tasteless for a fraction of a second. The koi froze mid-flicker. The gentle hum of the city's ambient chakra stuttered. Hinata's Byakugan flared on instinct, and she saw it, a jagged, silver scar in the fabric of space, high above the central spire, sealing itself shut with a painful slowness. It left behind a psychic aftertaste of ozone, old books, and deep, weary sorrow. Kakashi-sensei. The thought was immediate, a reflex from a lifetime of recognizing that unique, lazy yet deadly chakra signature. But this was wrong. This signature was strained, frayed at the edges, and carried the cold grit of a man who had stared into one abyss too many. She was on her feet, heart hammering. An intruder. A real one. Not a summoned bride, but a breaker and enterer. A part of her, the part that was still a Konoha Kunoichi, thrummed with alarm. Another part, the prisoner in the gilded cage, felt a treacherous spike of hope. She didn't go to the spire. She went to the mountains. She found Kuratsuchi not at her forge, but on a high outcrop overlooking the city, a rough sketchpad in her lap. She was drawing, not blueprints, but sharp, angular studies of the alien architecture, notes scrawled in margins about stress points and structural weaknesses. You felt it, Hinata said, her voice quiet but carrying in the thin mountain air. Kuratsuchi didn't look up. Felt what? The God King having a tantrum? No. Something else. A breach. From outside. A chakra signature I recognize. But it's wounded. Dangerous. That made Kuratsuchi lower her charcoal. Her dark eyes scanned the twilight sky, her earth scent spreading through the rock beneath them. I don't feel anyone new in the city. Just you, me, and the big sad lump in the tower. He's hiding his presence. He's very good at it. Hinata's Byakugan swept the city again, layer by layer. But the breach was real. And Naruto's chakra, it's agitated. Concentrated in the lower levels of the spire. He's anxious. Kuratsuchi snorted. Anxious. Good. Maybe this guest will stick a kunai in his delusions. She looked at Hinata, a speculative gleam in her eye. You know who it is? I believe it is Kakashi Hatake. The 6th Hokage. From a world like mine. A Hokage? Here. A grim smile touched Kuratsuchi's lips. Now that's a diplomatic incident. Is he here to rescue the fair maiden? The sarcasm was thick. Hinata ignored the jab. He's not here for me. He's here because of what Naruto is doing. The ripples. Kakashi-sensei was always the one who cleaned up the messes no one else saw. She wrapped her arms around herself. He'll be assessing. Looking for weaknesses. Weaknesses, Kuratsuchi repeated, her gaze drifting back to her sketches of the spire. I've identified 17 structural and 12 energetic vulnerabilities in the central tower alone. Assuming standard shinobi tactical paradigms, of course. Which probably don't apply to a reality warper. They might apply to the gardener, Hinata said softly. Kuratsuchi's head snapped up. The what? Hinata blushed faintly, realizing she'd spoken aloud a theory she'd been piecing together. There's a place. Below the spire. Naruto goes there often. His chakra becomes focused. Nurturing. And sad. Very, very sad. It feels like he's tending to something fragile. I think that's where he grows the doors to other worlds. Kuratsuchi stared at her, then let out a low, appreciative whistle. You've been doing more than perfecting your palm strikes, Hyuga. You've been spying on God. I have eyes that can see through walls, Hinata said simply. It's not spying. It's observation. Semantics. But a garden, that's a vulnerability. It implies a focus, a resource he needs to protect. It's a target. Kuratsuchi's mind was clearly racing, the strategist coming alive. If this Kakashi is half as sharp as the stories, he'll find it. Or he already has. What do we do? Hinata asked. We? Kuratsuchi raised an eyebrow. We do nothing. I am going back to my forge to work on a project that just became significantly more interesting. You can do whatever you like. Meditate by your pond. Practice your forms. Or, she added, her voice dropping, you could go see what the uninvited guest wants. You're the only one he might actually talk to without trying to kill on sight. She gathered her sketches and stood, dusting off her trousers. Just remember, Hyuga. If this Kakashi wins, if he shuts this whole place down, where does that leave us? Poof. Back to worlds that might have already written us off as dead? Or just, poof. She made a vanishing gesture with her hand. The question hung in the air, colder than the mountain wind. Hinata hadn't considered the aftermath. Her cage was a prison, but it was a known prison. The outside was an absolute unknown. I'll observe, Hinata said finally. Smart girl, Kuratsuchi said, and with a final, unreadable look at the distant spire, she vanished into the shadow of her cavern. Kakashi Hatake was, indeed, in the Soul Grove. He hadn't returned via the risky dimensional jump. He'd simply stayed. After his confrontation with Naruto, he'd used a high-level hiding-in-plain-sight technique, melding his chakra signature with the Grove's own morbid emissions. To the city's senses, he was just another strange bloom. Naruto had left the Grove shaken, and hadn't returned. Which gave Kakashi time to work. He moved through the pulsing, organic space with the silent grace of a shadow, his single visible eye recording everything. He didn't touch the blooms, but he studied them. He saw the Hinata flower, now dormant and gray, its connection severed. He saw the Kuratsuchi bloom, a thorny, mineral-heavy thing, also inactive. He saw the withered husk of the Sakura flower and paused for a long moment, his eye closing in pained understanding. So many stories, he murmured to himself, his voice muffled by his mask. All interrupted. His goal wasn't destruction. Not yet. It was intelligence. He needed to understand the mechanics. He unrolled a thin scroll and began sketching the Grove's layout, the flow of chakra veins, the way Naruto's indigo power was both the soil and the sun here. He took minute samples of the fibrous wall material, sealing them in vials that hissed faintly. He was so engrossed, the master spy in his element, that he almost missed the soft footfall at the Grove's entrance. Almost. He was behind a large, pulsing growth in an instant, chakra suppressed to nothing. He watched as Hinata Hyuga, or a version of her, stepped tentatively into the Grove. Her Byakugan was active, veins bulging, as she took in the horrific beauty of the place. He saw the moment she spotted the withered Sakura husk. Her hand flew to her mouth, and a shudder ran through her small frame. She wasn't here for Naruto. She was exploring. Curiosity overcoming fear. Just like her. Kakashi weighed his options. Engaging her was a risk. She could alert Naruto. But she was also a source. A piece of this puzzle who might have her own perspective. He decided. With a soft poof, he replaced himself with a minor illusion of shifting light on the wall and appeared, silent as a ghost, 3 feet behind her. It's not a pretty sight, is it? Hinata whirled, her hands coming up in a gentle fist stance, a soft shuck of displaced air the only sound. She saw him, and her stance didn't relax, but her eyes widened. Kakashi-sensei. I'm not your sensei, he said, repeating his line from before, but his tone was less harsh. More tired. But you can call me Kakashi. You're the Hinata from elsewhere. She nodded slowly, lowering her hands but not her guard. You're from a world like the one I was taken from. Probably. And you're here because he reached in and pulled you out. He gestured around. From a place like this. Yes. Her gaze was unwavering. Why are you here? To stop him? To understand first. Stopping might come later. If it's possible. He eyed her. Do you want me to stop him? The question was a trap, and they both knew it. Hinata looked away, her Byakugan deactivating, leaving her lavender eyes troubled. I want to go home. But I don't know if home is there anymore. He said, the thread was fraying. And you're here, which means the walls are thin. If this place falls, what happens to us? Honest answer? I don't know, Kakashi said. He leaned against a non-pulsing section of wall, affecting a casualness he didn't feel. You might snap back to your point of origin. You might be unmade as an unstable paradox. You might be stranded between dimensions as a permanent ghost. Gardening on this scale is unprecedented. He nodded to the blooms. He's playing with forces that make the Tentails look like a misbehaving pet. And he's doing it with a broken heart. The worst combination. He's in pain, Hinata said softly. We're all in pain, Kakashi replied, his eye sharpening. That's not a license to kidnap. The bluntness made her flinch. I know. But, he's not cruel. He's just empty. And he's trying to fill the void with reflections. It's not working. No, Kakashi agreed, his voice softening a fraction. It never does. He looked at her, really looked. She was young, scared, but there was a core of steel there. She was adapting, not breaking. The other one. The IWA Kunoichi. How is she? Angry. Practical. She's building a forge in the mountains. She's making real things. Good. Anger is useful. Practicality is essential. He pushed off the wall. I need you to do something for me. Don't tell him I'm still here. Let him think I've left. I need more time to study this place. And then what? Hinata asked, her voice firmer now. You'll attack him? If I have to. If I find a way that doesn't result in the catastrophic collapse of this pocket dimension and the probable erasure of you and the Tsuchikage. He sighed, the sound weary beyond measure. I'm not here to be a hero, Hinata. I'm here to clean up a catastrophic mess. Ideally with minimal collateral damage. You two are currently classified as collateral. Hinata absorbed this. She understood mission parameters. She was, after all, a kunoichi. What do you need from me? Information. Does he have patterns? Weak moments? Does he ever leave this grove unguarded? Does he sleep? He doesn't sleep. He rests. In his throne room. His chakra becomes diffuse, like he's listening to the whole city at once. The grove is always unguarded, in a sense, it's part of him. But he's most distracted just after he tends to it. He's sorrowful then. Less alert. Kakashi nodded, filing this away. Good. That's useful. And the Tsuchikage? She avoids him. And he avoids her. Their interactions are transactional. Even better. A divided house. Kakashi's eye crinkled. You're a good observer. Your team would be proud. The comment, meant to be a compliment, seemed to cause her physical pain. She hugged herself again. My team, in my world, I was never really on a team. Not like that. Ah. A different branch indeed. Kakashi felt a pang of unexpected sympathy. This girl was doubly displaced, from her world, and from the role she saw in Naruto's memories. Then you're on a team now. A team of 3 prisoners. Start thinking like it. The IWA woman is your comrade in arms, whether she likes it or not. And I am a potential extraction. Or a potential bomb. Watch. Learn. And if the moment comes where you see a chance to get out, you take it. Don't look back for him. He's made his choice. He began to turn, his form starting to blur with a body flicker. Kakashi, she said, stopping him. What's it like? Your world. He paused, half there, half gone. It's loud. Messy. Painful. Beautiful. People die. People live. We grieve. We rebuild. We fail. We try again. He met her eyes. It's real. And that's worth fighting for, even with all the pain. This? He gestured at the grove. This is a museum of stolen moments. It's not life. Remember that. And then he was gone, leaving her alone with the pulsing flowers and the ghost of his words. Hinata stood in the awful, beautiful room for a long time. She looked at the dormant bloom that had been her doorway. She looked at the withered sakura. She thought of Kuratsuchi's hammer ringing in the mountains. She thought of Naruto's star-pitted eyes filled with an ocean of sadness. You're on a team now. She turned and walked out of the Soul Grove, her steps quieter, surer than when she'd entered. She had a mission. An objective. It wasn't given by a Hokage or a clan elder. It was given by a ghost in the machine. But it was a purpose. She wouldn't tell Naruto about Kakashi. But she would go to the mountains. She would talk to Kuratsuchi. Not about forges or weaknesses, but about contingency plans. About what it meant to be a prisoner, and what it might mean to be free. The uninvited guest had changed the game. He hadn't brought weapons or armies. He'd brought perspective. And in a world built on a single, shattered perspective, that was the most dangerous thing of all. As she left the spire, she felt Naruto's diffuse awareness brush over her, a questioning, anxious touch. She sent back a pulse of calm, harmless emotion, the feeling of watching koi in a pond. A simple, quiet thing. The awareness withdrew, somewhat soothed. Hinata walked towards the mountains, the fabricated sun casting her long shadow on the pearl streets. For the first time, she didn't feel like a piece of a mosaic. She felt like a spy in the devil's court. And she had her first debrief to conduct. Chapter 6, The Feast of Fallen Moons. It started with a scent. Not the ever-present salt plum of Yuzushio, but something richer, warmer. The smell of baking bread, of roasting nuts, of caramelizing sugar and rare spices, cinnamon, cardamom, star anise, that had no business existing in this fabricated world. It drifted through the silent streets one morning, a ghost of a memory made real. Hinata, practicing her forms in her courtyard, paused mid-strike, her nostrils flaring. Kuratsuchi, elbow deep in the molten core of a new geothermal vent she was engineering, lifted her soot-streaked face, her pragmatic mind immediately cataloging the unfamiliar aromas. Up in the keystone spire, Naruto, who had been sitting motionless in his throne for 3 days, brooding over Kakashi's warning and the corrupted sakura bloom, stirred. The scents triggered a cascade of sense memory: Ichiraku's broth, festival stalls, the sticky sweetness of dango shared with friends under paper lanterns. The city was acting on its own. Or rather, it was acting on the deepest, most buried desires of its creator. A shard of Naruto's soul, the one that remembered community, celebration, the simple, loud joy of being surrounded by people, had finally screamed loud enough to be heard. By noon, the central plaza of Yuzushio, a vast, empty expanse of swirling pearl and obsidian, had transformed. Long tables of dark, polished wood appeared, laden with impossible food, steaming ramen bowls with broth that shimmered with real fat, perfectly grilled fish, mountains of rice, vegetables of colors that didn't exist in nature, and delicate, frosted sweets. Paper lanterns, glowing with a soft, internal light, hung from strings that materialized between buildings. Music, a gentle, wordless melody of flute and koto, seemed to emanate from the very air. It was a festival. A feast. A command. Naruto descended from his spire, drawn by the pull of it. He stood at the edge of the plaza, his dark Hokage cloak stark against the festive light. He felt a profound, aching ambivalence. This was a mockery of everything he'd lost, a puppet show of joy. Yet, the sight of the laden tables, the warm glow, the promise of life, it hooked into a need so deep it was physical. He saw Hinata emerge from a side street. She wore one of the simple, dark blue kimonos the city had provided, her hair loose. She looked at the feast, then at him, her expression unreadable. A moment later, Kuratsuchi arrived from the mountain path. She hadn't bothered to change. She was still in her work trousers and a sleeveless shirt, her arms smudged with ash and grit. She planted her hands on her hips, surveying the scene with a skeptic's glare. What's this? A last meal before the execution? The city, it's creating a festival, Naruto said, his voice softer than usual, almost lost in the music. I can see that. Why? Kuratsuchi's eyes narrowed. Is this your doing? Some pathetic attempt at bonding? No, he shook his head. It's responding. To what? Your loneliness. It's a bit late for that. She stalked over to a table, picked up a skewer of grilled meat, sniffed it suspiciously, then took a small, cautious bite. Her eyebrows rose. Huh. It's real. Tastes like properly marinated boar. Not bad. The admission seemed to irritate her further. Hinata approached more quietly. She stopped a respectful distance from Naruto, her eyes on the lanterns. It's beautiful, she said, and there was no lie in her voice. It was beautiful. A beautiful lie. It's empty, Naruto replied. Not entirely, she said, glancing at him. We're here. The simple statement hung in the festive air. We're here. His stolen reflections. His living ghosts. An awkward silence descended, punctuated only by the gentle music and the distant, fabricated chirp of crickets. The feast lay before them, a sprawling, untouched monument to forced merriment. The three of them stood at its edge, a triangle of isolation. Well, this is depressing, Kuratsuchi announced, swallowing another piece of meat. A party for 3, and 2 of us hate the host's guts. Some festival. She grabbed a clay jug, sniffed the contents, sake, surprisingly authentic, and took a long swig. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. Sitting around moping is a waste of good food. She pointed the skewer at Hinata. You. Hyuga. What's your favorite thing here? Hinata blinked, startled. I'm not sure. Pick something. Before the God King here decides it's all an illusion and makes it vanish. She turned her challenging gaze to Naruto. And you. Stop looming. Either sit down and eat, or go brood in your tower. But if you stay, you don't get to be the sad statue in the corner. Understood? It was so utterly, brazenly her that Naruto felt the ghost of a laugh, a dry, rusted thing, try to escape his throat. It came out as a choked cough. He nodded, the motion stiff. Hesitantly, they moved to the head table. Naruto sat at one end, a place of honor that felt like an accusation. Kuratsuchi plopped herself right in the middle, aggressively normal. Hinata sat at the other end, leaving vast empty benches between them all. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was, as Kuratsuchi attested, perfect. The flavors were vibrant, complex, achingly nostalgic. Naruto picked at a bowl of ramen, the taste of the broth so exactly like Tuchi's that it was a physical pain. He set down his chopsticks. This was a mistake, he murmured. Probably, Kuratsuchi agreed around a mouthful of rice. But the rice is excellent. Shut up and eat your mistake. It's the least you can do. Hinata watched their exchange, a faint, curious line between her brows. She took a small bite of a delicate, flower-shaped sweet. It tastes of cherry blossom and honey, she said softly. The music shifted, becoming slightly more upbeat. A warm, gentle breeze rustled the lanterns, making their light dance on the pearl pavement. So, Kuratsuchi said, slamming the sake jug down. Festival games. What do we have? Beanbag toss? Goldfish scooping? Test of strength? I don't think, Naruto began. Of course you don't. You don't think, you wallow. She stood up, scanning the plaza. There. She pointed. At the far end of the plaza, a simple wooden stand had appeared, with a row of clay targets and a basket of perfectly weighted, soft-throwing balls. Target practice. Universal language. She grabbed 3 balls, tossed one to Hinata, who caught it deftly, and lobbed one underhand at Naruto. It bounced off his chest before he could react. You're up, Uzumaki. Show us what a god's aim is like. It was so ridiculous, so utterly divorced from the cosmic horror of his existence, that he just stared at the ball at his feet. Hinata was watching him, a strange, almost hopeful look on her face. He bent down, picked up the ball. It was cool and smooth in his palm. Real. He looked at the targets, simple things shaped like concentric circles. He hadn't thrown something this mundane in, forever. He threw. Not with chakra, not with will. With the muscle memory of a boy playing in Konoha streets. The ball sailed in a slow, lazy arc and missed the entire stand by 2 feet, clattering against the wall behind it. A beat of silence. Then Kuratsuchi let out a snort. Then a full-bellied, genuine laugh. It was a rough, grating sound, utterly unladylike and completely real. Ha! The mighty Okami. Can't hit the broad side of a barn. Hinata's hand flew to her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking. A small, breathy giggle escaped her lips, her eyes wide with surprise at her own reaction. Naruto stared at his missed shot, then at Kuratsuchi's laughing face, then at Hinata's suppressed mirth. And something in the frozen cavern of his chest cracked. Not a sob. A release of pressure. A tiny, absurd bubble of humor rose through the tar of his grief. A smile touched his lips. It felt alien, like using a forgotten muscle. It was small, and sad, but it was there. Shut up, he said, but there was no heat in it. He walked over, picked up another ball. My turn again. Like hell it is. Hyuga's turn. Let's see if the Byakugan gives you an unfair advantage, girl. Hinata, still smiling shyly, stood. She took a breath, centered herself, and threw. Her form was elegant, precise. The ball sailed straight and true, striking the center target with a satisfying thwack. Kuratsuchi whistled. Not bad. All right, my turn. She took her position, wound up with exaggerated, pitcher-like drama, and hurled the ball. It smashed into the target next to Hinata's, shattering the clay disc into pieces. Oops, she said, not sounding sorry at all. They played for a while. Naruto's aim improved marginally. Hinata was consistently accurate. Kuratsuchi was consistently destructive. They ran out of intact targets. The sake jug emptied. The absurdity of the situation, a devil, a kidnapped kunoichi, and a deposed Tsuchikage playing a carnival game in a pocket dimension, faded under the simple, physical act of doing something together. They moved back to the table, the mood lighter, the silence between them now companionable rather than hostile. Kuratsuchi produced a second jug of sake from somewhere. Hinata tried a sip and coughed, her face turning pink, which made Kuratsuchi laugh again. So, Kuratsuchi said, leaning back, her eyes on the false stars now appearing in the purple sky. Festivals in IWA were always a bit grim. Lots of drinking to forget the rocks in your boots. What were Konohas like, Hyuga? Hinata, emboldened by the sake and the strange camaraderie, spoke softly about the fire festival, the lanterns on the river, the dances. Naruto listened, adding a detail here and there, the specific stall that sold the best fried squid, the way the old folks would tell ghost stories. He spoke of it in the past tense, a historian describing a dead civilization. But he was speaking. Kuratsuchi talked about Iwa's Earth Grudge Festival, a celebration of perseverance, where people would try to lift progressively heavier stones. Broke my personal record at 16, she said with pride. My grandfather nearly smiled. Nearly. It was the most personal thing she'd shared. Naruto found himself looking at her not as a piece of stone for his mosaic, but as a person with a history, with pride, with a grandfather who rarely smiled. The conversation lulled. The music softened. The feast around them was still largely untouched, a testament to the impossibility of filling the void. Then, from the direction of the spire, a new figure emerged. She moved with a serene, floating grace, her steps making no sound on the pearl stone. She wore a simple white robe with red clouds, her blue hair styled in her signature loops, a single paper flower tucked behind one ear. Her expression was calm, placid, almost empty. It was Konan, the angel of the Amage cure. But like the others, she was a reflection. This Konan came from a branch where Pain's dream had died not in violence, but in quiet dissipation. Where she had survived, alone, tending the rain as a monk tends a temple, her purpose evaporated, leaving only a profound, peaceful stillness. Naruto stood up abruptly, his chair scraping. He hadn't summoned her. Not consciously. But the city, sensing his momentary relaxation, his flicker of something resembling peace, had reached for a frequency that matched it. The calm, papery grace of Konan. The bloom he had hesitated over in the Soul Grove had unfolded on its own. Hinata and Kuratsuchi fell silent, watching as the blue-haired woman approached. She stopped a few feet from the table, her rain-gray eyes passing over them without judgment, without curiosity, finally settling on Naruto. You have built a quiet place, she said. Her voice was like the rustle of dry paper, soft and emotionless. The rain does not fall here. It is unusual. Konan, Naruto breathed. I didn't mean to. Intent is a stone dropped in a pond, she said, tilting her head. The ripples are what matter. Your ripples brought me here. I am content. There is no war here. No pain. Just stillness. She looked at the lanterns, the untouched food. A feast for fallen moons. How apartment. She didn't ask why she was here. She didn't seem to care. She simply accepted, with the terrifying serenity of someone who has already let go of everything. She sat on one of the empty benches, folding her hands in her lap. She was present, yet utterly detached. A statue of tranquility at their chaotic little table. The fragile camaraderie of the moment shattered. Kuratsuchi's face hardened. Another one, she muttered into her cup. Collected like a souvenir. Hinata looked from Konan's peaceful face to Naruto's stricken one. The brief, flickering light of the festival was guttering, swallowed by the reality of what they were, what he was doing. Naruto sank back into his seat. The taste of ramen was ash in his mouth. Konan's presence wasn't a comfort. It was a mirror held up to his own emptiness. Her peace was born of resignation. His was born of theft. They were not the same. The feast of fallen moons was over. The lanterns seemed to dim. The music faded to a whisper. Konan looked up at the false stars. It is a beautiful cage, she said, as if commenting on the weather. I have known worse. Her words were the final nail. Naruto pushed away from the table. I'm sorry, he said, to all of them, to no one, and walked away, back towards his dark spire, leaving the three women amidst the ruins of the festival. Kuratsuchi watched him go, then poured the last of the sake. Well. That was fun while it lasted. Her voice was flat. Hinata looked at Conan, who simply sat, a peaceful ghost. She looked at the shattered clay targets. She looked at the empty spot where Naruto had been. The city, responding to its creator's retreat, began to quietly dismantle the feast. The food vanished, not leaving a crumb. The lanterns winked out one by one. The tables and stands melted back into the pavement. In minutes, the plaza was empty again, just pristine pearl and obsidian under a twilight sky. Only the scent of spices lingered for a moment, a haunting reminder of the joy that almost was. Kuratsuchi stood, stretched. Come on, Hyuga. Let's get out of this crypt. I've got a new alloy cooling in the forge that might actually be interesting. She glanced at Conan. You coming, paper girl? Or you just gonna sit there? Conan stood, smooth as unfolding origami. I will follow. Stillness can be found anywhere. She offered no thanks, no acknowledgement. She simply existed. Hinata stood, feeling the chill return to the air. She took one last look at the empty plaza, then turned and followed the other two women towards the mountains. The team of prisoners, now 4, walked in silence, the brief, beautiful, terrible feast already receding into the realm of memory, another fallen moon in the devil's sky. In the Keystone Spire, Naruto stood on his balcony, watching the 3 tiny figures move away. The echo of Kuratsuchi's laugh still rang in the hollows of his mind. The sight of Hinata's shy smile was etched behind his eyes. The serene, terrible peace of Conan sat in his soul like a stone. He had wanted to quiet the silence. Now the silence was filled with the echoes of laughter he had killed, of conversations that could have been, and the soft, papery rustle of a peace that was not his own. The feast was over. The hunger remained. Chapter 7, The Whispering Chasm. The silence after the feast was different. It wasn't the pure, empty silence of before. It was a silence listened to. It was filled with the phantom aroma of spices, the ghost of a laugh, the unsettling rustle of paper. It was a silence that remembered noise, and the memory was worse than the emptiness. Naruto spent the following days in a state of heightened, paranoid awareness. The city felt different. The perfect, seamless integration of his will and the Voidmaw's residue had developed, a tremor. A faint, discordant hum underneath the usual stillness. It was most pronounced in the lower levels of the spire, near the Soul Grove, but it bled outwards, a psychic dampness in the air. Hinata felt it first. Her Byakugan, sensitive to the finest fluctuations in chakra and energy fields, picked up the anomaly during her morning meditation. It was a thinness, a cold spot in the ambient energy of her eastern quarter. Not an absence, but a pull, like a drain in the bottom of a warm bath. It made the hair on her arms stand up. She found Kuratsuchi in her mountain forge, but the Tsuchikage wasn't working. She was standing rigid in the center of the cavern, one hand pressed flat against the stone floor, her eyes closed in fierce concentration. You feel it, Hinata said, not a question. Like a toothache in the bedrock, Kuratsuchi growled, not opening her eyes. It's deep. And it's not a natural flaw. It's a tear. Something's wearing through from the other side. The side he patched over when he made this pretty little snow globe. From the void? From whatever's outside the void. The place his power came from. It's not stable, Hyuga. His grief, his guilt, his little party, it stressed the seams. She opened her eyes, her expression grim. I've been mapping it. The weak point is concentrated below the central spire. In his garden. Hinata's blood ran cold. Kakashi was down there. We have to warn him. Warn who? The god who kidnapped us? Or the ghost Hokage skulking in his basement? Kuratsuchi stood, brushing stone dust from her hands. The ghost can look after himself. As for Uzumaki, maybe letting a little reality in would do him good. That's not reality, Hinata said, her voice sharper than she intended. That's what unmade his reality. If it breaks through. Kuratsuchi met her gaze, and Hinata saw the fear there, buried under layers of anger and pragmatism. The Tsuchikage knew the stakes. If the pocket dimension failed, they weren't just going home. They were ceasing to be. Fine, Kuratsuchi conceded. But we're not going to him like scared children. We go as scouts. We assess. And we do not get in the way if the universe decides to take out the trash. In the Soul Grove, the horror was already manifesting. Kakashi felt it first as a drop in temperature so severe his breath fogged in the humid air. The gentle, bioluminescent glow of the walls dimmed, as if the light were being sucked away. The beautiful, terrible flowers began to wilt. Not like the corrupted sakura bloom, which had dried and blackened. This was a slow, sickly fading, their colors leaching out, their petals becoming translucent and brittle. And they were whispering. Not in words. In stolen sensations. A flash of freezing water, Zabuza's mist. The smell of blood and iron, 1,000 battles. The taste of cheap soy sauce, Team 7's first meal. The sound of a flute, Itachi's genjutsu. They were snippets of memory, of pain and loss, pulled from the collective unconscious of the blooms and vomited into the air. The psychic noise was a deafening, silent scream. Kakashi, hidden in his perfect camouflage, felt it like a physical pressure. He saw it too, a darkness deeper than the grove's shadows was pooling in the very center of the room, where Naruto usually sat to meditate. It wasn't a void. It was a stain. A patch of reality that had forgotten its rules, a hole wearing through the canvas. He was calculating the risk of moving, of trying to reinforce the weakness with his own fuinjutsu, when Naruto arrived. The devil of Uzushio entered not with a dramatic flair, but with a slow, heavy tread. His star-pitted eyes were fixed on the staining darkness. He looked old. Weary in a way that had nothing to do with years. You feel it, Kakashi said, letting his camouflage drop. He didn't see the point in hiding now. The thing in the room was a bigger threat. Naruto didn't seem surprised to see him. He just nodded, his gaze never leaving the growing stain. It's my fault. The festival, the emotions, they agitated the boundary. The seal I am, it's cracked. Seal? Kakashi prompted, his mind racing. He'd suspected Naruto was more conduit than source. I'm not just a god, Kakashi, Naruto said, his voice thick with self-loathing. I'm a cork. I stuffed myself into the hole the maw left. My grief, my chakra, my will, it's the paste holding this reality together. But the paste is toxic. It's rotting from the inside. He took a step towards the stain. And that is the rot looking back. The stain shivered. It wasn't a shape. It was an anti-shape. It was the visual equivalent of the whispering, a condensation of forgotten fears, unmade possibilities, the screams that never left a throat. From its edges, tendrils of profound cold and silence began to seep out, crawling across the fibrous floor. Where they touched, the floor didn't freeze or break. It just gave up. It became inert, meaningless matter, like the gray powder left by the void maw. This is what comes after the consumption, Naruto whispered. Not nothing. Resignation. A tendril lashed out, not at Naruto, but at a nearby cluster of blooms, a delicate set showing scenes of youthful innocence. The moment the tendril made contact, the flowers didn't wither. They sagged. Their images blurred into gray monotony, their subtle chakra signatures flattening into a dull, exhausted hum. They became portraits of despair. Naruto moved. He didn't use a jutsu. He interposed. His body, wreathed in the indigo-black energy of his inverted cloak, stepped into the path of the next tendril. It struck his chest. And for the first time, Kakashi saw Naruto hurt. It wasn't a physical wound. Naruto didn't bleed. He dimmed. The light in his star-pitted eyes flickered. A wave of debilitating, soul-crushing apathy radiated from the point of contact. Kakashi, standing 20 feet away, felt a wave of it, a sudden, overwhelming urge to just lie down, to stop trying, to let the quiet gray take him. It was the most insidious attack he'd ever witnessed. Naruto staggered, a gasp tearing from his lips. He clutched his chest, not in pain, but in a fight against a terrifying numbness. No. He gritted out. You don't get to make me not care. I have to care. It's all I have left. He pushed forward, his hand shooting out. Indigo energy, sharp and defiant, erupted from his palm, not as an attack, but as a bandage. He tried to seal the stain, to paste his will over the crack. The stain resisted. It drank the indigo energy, dulling it, turning it from vibrant defiance into a sluggish, gray slurry. The whispering grew louder in Kakashi's mind, give up, it's easier, just stop, no one will blame you, you're so tired. Uzumaki. It's feeding on your resolve. Kakashi yelled, fighting the psychic pull himself. He knew sealing. This wasn't working. This was like trying to plug a leak with wet paper. Naruto seemed to realize it too. He roared, a sound of pure frustration and anguish, and poured more power in. The stain grew, fed by his desperate energy. The tendrils multiplied, spreading outwards, seeking the walls, seeking the other blooms. One found a different target. In the chaos, Konan had entered the grove. She stood at the entrance, drawn by the disturbance. Her paper-gray eyes watched the conflict with detached curiosity. She didn't seem afraid of the creeping gray tendrils. She saw them as just another form of stillness. A tendril, thin and fast, slithered across the floor and touched her bare foot. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Conan didn't scream. She sighed. A sigh of profound, final relief. Her already placid expression went utterly, completely blank. The light of consciousness in her eyes didn't go out, it simply settled. Like dust. Her body began to change. From the point of contact, a gray, paper-like texture spread up her leg, across her torso, down her arms. It wasn't destroying her. It was preserving her in a state of absolute, emotionless nullity. She was becoming a statue of peaceful despair, a perfect, frozen monument to giving up. No. This time, the scream was from Hinata. She and Kuratsuchi burst into the grove from another entrance. Hinata took in the scene, Naruto locked in a losing struggle, Kakashi fighting psychic exhaustion, and Conan turning into a grey paper effigy of herself. Without a second thought, she moved. 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven, she cried, a sphere of chakra erupting around her. She didn't aim at the stain. She aimed at the tendril connected to Conan. The rotating chakra field, designed to repel all attacks, slammed into the grey tendril. And did nothing. The tendril wasn't an attack. It was an offer. Hinata's defiant, protective chakra simply washed over it, having no purchase. The grey continued its ascent up Conan's body, past her waist now. Fire release, great fireball. Kuratsuchi's voice was a whipcrack in the humid air. A torrent of flame, hotter and more focused than any standard technique, roared from her mouth, engulfing the tendril and the base of the stain. The fire didn't burn. It cooled. The flames turned grey and fell to the floor as lifeless ash. The stain pulsed, seemingly amused. Physical and chakra attacks are useless. Kakashi shouted, his mind working feverishly. It negates will. It negates action. Then he saw it. As Hinata's revolving heaven faded, a different energy had flared around her for a split second, pure, white, and fiercely protective. It was the energy of the Hyuga's gentle fist, but aimed with a specific, selfless intent. It hadn't hurt the tendril, but for a microsecond, the grey had recoiled, as if confused. It negates action born of personal desire, of aggression, of selfish will, Kakashi's mind raced. But what about? Naruto was on his knees now, the grey numbness spreading through him from the constant contact. He was losing. The stain was spreading, consuming the grove, turning it into a gallery of resigned ghosts. Hinata! Kakashi yelled, his voice cutting through the whispers. Don't fight it. Protect her. Not to defeat it, but to shelter her. Remember what protection feels like. Not as a weapon, as a blanket. Hinata, tears of frustration in her eyes, looked from Kakashi to the half-grey Conan. She didn't understand the theory, but she understood the command. She dropped her stance. Let go of the desire to destroy the tendril. She thought of holding Himawari during a thunderstorm. Of standing beside Naruto on a windy cliff. Of a silent vow to keep someone safe, no matter what. A soft, white light, gentle but unyielding, emanated from her palms. It wasn't chakra in the offensive sense. It was care made manifest. She stepped forward and placed her hands on Conan's grey-encrusted shoulders. The grey tendril hissed. It wasn't a sound of pain, but of dissonance. This energy, selfless, nurturing, focused entirely on another, was alien to it. It was an action that didn't come from a place of lack, but from a place of fullness. The grey advance slowed, then stopped. It began to recede from Hinata's touch, peeling back from Conan like a scab. Seeing it, understanding dawned on Naruto. He wasn't fighting to save his world or out of guilt. He was fighting because he was angry, because he was afraid, because he refused to let go. His will was born of need. And the stain fed on need. He had to find a different reason. He looked at Hinata, her face a mask of determined compassion as she fought to pull Conan back from a grey eternity. He looked at Kuratsuchi, who was now using her earth release not to attack, but to build a small, physical wall between the spreading stain and a cluster of innocent child blooms, a grunt of effort on her face, not for strategy, but because leaving them undefended was unacceptable. He looked at Kakashi, who was weaving Fuinjutsu symbols in the air, not to bind the stain, but to create a harmonic buffer around them, a shield of pure, complex order against the entropy. They were all acting, not from their own void, but from what they still held inside. With a groan that came from the depths of his soul, Naruto stopped pushing his indigo will against the stain. He pulled it back. He let go of the desperate, starving need that had defined him since the end of his world. Instead, he thought of the koi in Hinata's pond. Of the ringing sound of Kuratsuchi's hammer. Of the taste of real sake under false stars. Of Kakashi's weary, truthful eyes. He thought of them not as echoes, but as people. And he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt since his family unmade, a desire for their world to continue. Not his fantasy, but this one, flawed and stolen as it was. He placed his hands on the edges of the staining darkness. But this time, he didn't pour in negation or defiant will. He channeled the memory of Irika's hand on his head. Of Jiraiya's stupid laugh. Of his father's proud smile. Of his mother's fierce hug. Love that was given, not taken. A fullness, not an emptiness. His indigo energy changed. The crawling veins of black receded. The color softened, lightened to a deep, vibrant blue at its core, edged with gold, the ghost of his old cloak. The energy flowed into the stain not as a plug, but as a graft. The whispering stopped. The stain didn't vanish. It couldn't. It was a part of him, a part of this reality's foundation. But it stabilized. The gray tendrils withdrew, coalescing back into a contained, dark patch on the floor, now ringed with a faint, shimmering light of blue and gold. It was no longer a spreading wound. It was a memorial. A sealed scar. The psychic pressure lifted. The grove was a wreck. A third of the blooms were gray, sagging monuments. Conan stood, half her body returned to normal color, the other half still smooth, featureless gray paper from the hip down. She looked at her gray leg with the same detached curiosity. Naruto slumped to his knees, panting, the new blue-gold energy flickering and fading from his cloak, leaving the familiar indigo and black, but it seemed quieter. The star-pitted eyes were dim with exhaustion. Silence returned, but it was the silence after a storm. Broken, littered with damage, but real. Kuratsuchi leaned against her earthen wall, breathing hard. What, in the seven hells, was that? A guilt complex given cosmic form, Kakashi said, lowering his hands, the Fuinjutsu symbols fading. He looked at Naruto with something that wasn't quite pity, wasn't quite respect. You sealed it. With a different kind of pain. Hinata helped Conan, who could walk but moved with a stiff, lurching gait. Are you, all right? I am as I was, Conan said in her paper-soft voice. Still. The gray is, quiet. It is not unpleasant. She was a living paradox now, half serene acceptance, half numb resignation. Naruto got to his feet, swaying. He looked at the sealed scar, at his broken garden, at the four people staring at him. I'm sorry, he said, and this time it wasn't a whisper to the universe. It was directed at them. This is my creation. My danger. You shouldn't have had to face it. Yeah, well, we're here, Kuratsuchi said, pushing off her wall. And your garden's a mess. If this is the engine room, we need to make sure it doesn't blow again. So stop apologizing and start explaining. What do we need to do to fortify this chasm? We. The word hung in the damaged air. Hinata looked at Kuratsuchi, then at Kakashi, then at the broken devil before them. Kakashi gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. They weren't a harem. They weren't a collection, they were the crew of a sinking, haunted ship. And the captain had just shown them the leak. Naruto looked at them, his shattered soul seeing not reflections, but allies. Flawed, unwilling, angry, compassionate allies. The scar is stable, he said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old, firm resolve. But the weakness remains. The walls are thin here. We need to reinforce reality around it. Not with my power alone. It needs anchors. Things that are real, and strong, and belong. He looked at each of them. Things like you. The whispering chasm had been sealed. Not by a god's might, but by a memory of love and the unexpected solidarity of the stolen. The horror had been confronted, and in its wake, something new and fragile had been born in the devil's palace, not peace, but a precarious, hard-won truce. And a shared understanding that the silence outside was the least of their worries. Chapter 8, The Crimson Bride. The recovery was slow, physical, and strangely domestic. Conan's partial petrification was permanent, it seemed. Her right leg and hip remained smooth, featureless gray paper, cold to the touch and utterly insensate. She moved with a stiff, shuffling gait, but her serenity was unbroken. She took to sitting for long hours by Hinata's koi pond, folding intricate paper sculptures that pulsed with faint, non-functional chakra. She was a neutral party, a living warning, and a new piece of the strange furniture. Kakashi had shifted from uninvited guest to grudging consultant. He no longer hid. He spent his days between the Soul Grove, studying the sealed scar and the damaged blooms with clinical intensity, and Kuratsuchi's mountain forge, where they argued ferociously over the metaphysical equivalent of load-bearing walls and reinforcement struts. Their collaboration was a thing of sharp words, muttered equations, and a growing, begrudging respect. Hinata became the unexpected linchpin. Her gentle but firm presence was the only thing that could bridge the gaps between Kakashi's weary cynicism, Kuratsuchi's abrasive pragmatism, and Naruto's shattered guilt. She brought tea to the forge, asked Kakashi clarifying questions that cut to the heart of the problem, and quietly ensured Konan was, not forgotten, but integrated. She was the camp medic, the quartermaster, the diplomat of their broken little outpost. Naruto himself was different. The confrontation with the Whispering Chasm, the manifestation of his own despair, had fundamentally altered something. The raw, howling edge of his grief had been blunted, replaced by a heavy, focused responsibility. He was less a god drowning in sorrow and more a captain steering a damaged ship through a storm he'd created. He consulted with Kakashi. He listened to Kuratsuchi's abrasive assessments of the city's structural integrity. He accepted Hinata's quiet suggestions. The devil was learning to delegate. But the city still hungered. The sealed scar in the Soul Grove was stable, but it was a patch, not a cure. The pocket universe, born of stolen energy and grief, needed more anchors to resist the entropic pull of the void outside. The logic was inescapable. To preserve the 4 lives now dependent on this reality, he needed to strengthen the reality itself. He needed another strong, resonant frequency. Another pillar. The shard of his soul that ached this time was not for a lover or a comrade. It was for something subtler, more complex. It yearned for political acumen, for worldly grace, for a sharp wit and a will that had carved a path through blood and mist. It missed the challenging, appraising gaze of a fellow Kage. It missed Mei Terumi. But not his Mei. Not the one who had fought beside him in the war. He needed a Mei from a world where her ambition had burned brighter, her resolve harder. A world where she hadn't just helped unite the ninja world, but had dominated it. A conqueror, not a conciliator. A pillar of ruthless, elegant strength. He went to the Soul Grove alone. The damaged blooms had been cleared, the gray-sagged ones placed in a quiet, segregated section, a memorial garden for failures. The sealed scar pulsed softly in the center, a dark eye rimmed in blue-gold light. He approached a section of wall that had remained healthy. He focused not on loss, not on need, but on a concept, unyielding sovereignty. He placed his hand on the pulsing fiber. He didn't plead or grieve. He offered. A vision of Uzushio, not as a sanctuary, but as a nascent kingdom. A realm that needed a ruler's touch, a diplomat's cunning, a queen's strength. The wall swelled. A new bud formed, not of iridescent white, but of deep, volcanic crimson streaked with veins of obsidian. It grew rapidly, fueled by the new, pragmatic purpose in his will. It pulsed with a hot, dense chakra that smelled of sulfur, sea spray, and expensive perfume. He watched it unfold, a sense of grim inevitability settling in his stomach. This wasn't a rescue. This was a recruitment. A summoning for a job. The petals opened. The image within was not a moment of vulnerability, but of triumph. A great hall of polished stone and water features. Mei Terumi, older than he remembered, her hair long and styled in elegant waves, stood on a dais. She wore not the standard Mizukage robe, but a gown of deep crimson silk that hinted at both courtly grace and armored plates beneath. Before her knelt the leaders of the other great villages, their heads bowed. The 5th Mizukage, the unifier of the 5. The image held, then shattered like glass. The portal opened not with a tear, but with a smooth, silent parting of reality, as if a curtain were being drawn aside. Through it stepped Mei. She took a single, measured step onto the grove's fibrous floor, and the portal sealed behind her. Her reaction was the polar opposite of every other arrival. There was no shock, no fear, no disorientation. She paused, her vibrant green eyes, one normal, one a paler, milky jade, swept the organic, pulsing chamber with the analytical gaze of a general surveying a new battlefield. She inhaled, tasting the air, ozone, decay, his chakra. She did not look at Naruto immediately, she was cataloging. Finally, her gaze settled on him. A faint, enigmatic smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, she said, her voice a rich, melodic contralto that held an edge like a polished razor. This is unexpected. A pocket dimension. And you are not the Naruto Uzumaki of my world. Your energy is corrupted. Fascinating. No questions. Just assessments. Welcome, Mei Terumi, Naruto said, finding his voice. It felt inadequate. Mizukage, she corrected gently, the smile still playing on her lips. 5th Mizukage, and regent of the unified shinobi territories. And you are? She tilted her head, a gesture that was both charming and deeply predatory. The creator of this place. You can call me Okami. Wolf, she translated, her eyes gleaming. Or, great god. Pretentious. But apt, given the scale. She took a slow step towards him, her gown whispering against the floor. You pulled me from the pinnacle of my reign. That implies either staggering power or staggering foolishness. Which is it? Necessity, he replied, meeting her gaze. This reality is unstable. It requires strong anchors. Pillars. Your strength, your will, is formidable. So I am to be a load-bearing wall in your little dollhouse, she mused, not insulted, but intrigued. And what do I get in return, Okami-sama? A title? A domain? Or just the privilege of being part of your collection? Her eyes flicked to the memorial of grey blooms. Your continued existence, he said bluntly. The thread I took you from was ending. Not in war, but in stagnation. Your unified territories were rotting from within, a slow poison of peace you couldn't stomach. You were contemplating a purge that would have drowned the world in blood once more. Her smile vanished. The charming facade dropped, revealing the steel beneath. She studied him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something real, not fear, but a sharp, calculating recognition. He had seen her truth. He had pulled her not from victory, but from the precipice of a terrible, glorious downfall. I see, she said softly. So you offer me a new kingdom to rule. This one. She gestured vaguely upwards. And the other, residence? There are 3 others. A Hyuga heiress. A Tsuchikage. A neutral party from Amigakure. They are adjusting. A court, she said, the smile returning, now tinged with genuine amusement. A fractured, unwilling court. And you, the distant, brooding king. How very dramatic. She walked past him, running a finger along a pulsing vein in the wall. It's alive. And it's tied to you. You are the land. An interesting form of sovereignty. Absolute, yet fragile. You need a steward. Someone who understands the art of rule, not just the brute force of creation. She turned back to him. I accept. It was too easy. Just like that? I am a pragmatist, Okami. My old world offered me only decay or monstrosity. This offers a challenge. A blank slate, albeit a prefurnished one. And, her eyes narrowed shrewdly, it offers me proximity to the source of power. You are the god here. But even gods need ministers. She stepped close, within arm's reach. She smelled of salt, iron, and night-blooming jasmine. I will be your crimson bride. Your queen in all but your bed, unless, of course, that becomes strategically useful. I will organize your broken court. I will fortify your realm. I will make this silent city sing with purpose. And in return, you will give me a domain to manage. Real authority. Not as a prisoner, but as a partner in governance. Do we have an accord? It was a contract. A political marriage in the truest sense. She was not offering love or even loyalty. She was offering her formidable skills in exchange for power and purpose. It was the most honest transaction he'd engaged in since his ascension. He looked at her, beautiful, dangerous, sharp as a coral reef. She was another piece, yes. But she was a piece that came with her own agenda, her own army of one. She wouldn't quiet the silence. She would fill it with politics, strategy, and the relentless hum of ambition. We have an accord, Naruto said, and extended his hand. She took it, not with a delicate touch, but with a firm, warm, politically significant grip. Her skin was smooth but strong. Excellent. Then take me to my new domain, husband. And introduce me to the court. The introduction, held in the now barren Central Plaza, was a masterpiece of tense diplomacy. Hinata offered a perfect, polite bow, her Byakugan discreetly active. Welcome, Mizukichi-sama. Lady Hyuga, May returned with equal, polished grace, her eyes missing nothing. Your chakra control is exquisite. A valuable asset. Kuratsuchi stood with arms crossed, her posture screaming unimpressed. Terumi. Last I heard, you were busy playing Empress. Kuratsuchi, May's smile was a razor's edge. Still playing in the dirt, I see. I look forward to seeing your forges. Infrastructure is the backbone of any state. Conan simply stared, her paper gray eye reflecting nothing. May's gaze lingered on her petrified leg, then her face, reading the profound stillness there. And you are the monument, she said, not unkindly. A reminder of the cost. Every court needs one. Kakashi leaned against a pillar, his eye crinkled in what might have been amusement. Hataki Kakashi. 6th Hokage, retired. Currently serving as consultant. The ghost Hokage, May said, her interest visibly piqued. Your reputation for cleaning up messes precedes you. I suspect we will be working closely. In under 5 minutes, she had categorized, assessed, and assigned a provisional role to each of them. She turned to Naruto. The city is beautiful but inert. It lacks hierarchy, districts, purpose. I will need a headquarters. The central spire is yours, the seat of ultimate power. I will take the largest of the secondary spires to the south. I will call it the Coral Tower. From there, I will begin a census of resources, assign living quarters based on function, and establish a basic governance council. She looked at the others. We will meet daily at sunset. Attendance is mandatory. We are no longer survivors. We are a nascent civilization. We will act like one. Kuratsuchi opened her mouth to protest, but Kakashi spoke first. She's right. Chaos nearly killed us. Order, even imposed order, might keep us alive. I'll attend. Hinata nodded slowly. A structure would be helpful. Grudgingly, Kuratsuchi gave a sharp nod. Konan said nothing, which was taken as assent. Mei clapped her hands together once, a soft, decisive sound. Then we begin. Naruto, if you would. My tower. Naruto, who had been observing the sudden, seismic shift in his world's dynamics with a sort of stunned detachment, simply waved a hand. In the distance, one of the smaller spiraling towers shimmered and reconfigured, its pearl color deepening to a rosy, coral hue, its windows forming elegant, arched shapes. Mei smiled, a genuine expression of pleasure this time. Lovely. A queen should not have to decorate her own throne room. With a swirl of crimson silk, she set off towards her new domain, already issuing soft, clear commands that the city itself seemed to lean in to hear. The others watched her go. Well, Kuratsuchi muttered. She's a handful. She's what we need, Kakashi said, pushing off the pillar. A catalyst. She'll either get us organized or get us all killed. Either way, it'll be interesting. Hinata looked at Naruto. She sees things, very clearly. She sees opportunities, Naruto corrected quietly. And I just gave her the biggest one of her life. He felt a new pressure, different from grief. The pressure of a partnership with a woman who looked at his godhood and saw not a tragedy, but a tool. The Crimson Bride had arrived. And the Devil's Harem would never be the same again. In the days that followed, Uzushio awoke from its beautiful stupor. Under Mei's direction, the city began to differentiate. The eastern quarter remained Hinata's serene, garden-filled sanctuary. The northern mountains were officially designated the Forge, Kuratsuchi's industrial domain. A quiet, shaded grove near the plaza became the archive, where Kakashi and his scrolls took root. Konan was given a quiet pavilion overlooking the ocean, the Still Point. And from the Coral Tower, a soft but relentless energy pulsed. Schedules appeared. Requests for resource inventories were sent, politely to Hinata, bluntly to Kuratsuchi. Meetings at sunset were held, where Mei listened, debated, and decided with unsettling efficiency. She didn't challenge Naruto's ultimate authority, she simply began administering everything beneath it. Naruto found himself both relieved and unnerved. The crushing burden of micromanaging existence was lifted. But in its place was the knowledge that a brilliant, ambitious serpent now coiled in the heart of his garden, not to steal it, but to cultivate it for her own purposes. He visited her in the Coral Tower one evening. She stood on a balcony, looking over the now organized city, a scroll of her own notes in hand. She'd changed into a simpler, but no less elegant, crimson dressing gown. You've been busy, he said. A realm does not run itself, she replied, not turning. Even a divine one. Your people were languishing. Directionless. I have given them direction. They're not my people. Aren't they? She finally looked at him, her green eyes sharp in the twilight. You brought them here. You are responsible for their well-being. That makes them your people, Okami. Sovereignty is responsibility, not just power. You had the latter. I am helping you with the former. He had no rebuttal. She was right. He'd been a curator of ghosts. She was building a society. Why are you really here, Mei? He asked, the question slipping out. She set the scroll down and approached him. She reached up and, with a surprising gentleness, traced the dark whisker mark on his cheek. Her touch was warm. Because you are the most interesting thing to happen to me in a decade, she said, her voice low. A god made of grief and void. A kingdom born of loss. A court of rivals and victims. It's a puzzle worthy of a lifetime. And because, her gaze softened, just a fraction, to know what it is to stand atop a lonely peak. You built yourself a higher one. I suppose I just wanted to see the view. For a moment, the politician was gone, and he saw the woman beneath, driven, lonely, endlessly curious. Then the mask slid back into place. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a trade proposal to draft for the Forge Quarter. Lady Kuratsuchi's steel output is impressive, but her record-keeping is atrocious. She turned back to her scrolls, dismissing him. Naruto left the Coral Tower, the city now humming with a soft, organized energy. The silence was being replaced not with laughter or love, but with purpose. It was not the peace he'd envisioned. It was a tense, vibrant, political peace. The Crimson Bride had not come to fill his heart. She had come to run his kingdom. And as he walked back to his own silent spire, he realized, with a strange, hollow ache, that it might be exactly what they all needed. Chapter 9, The Memory Thief. Conan's paper sculptures began to change. At first, it was subtle. A crane, perfectly folded from pale blue parchment, would have a single, gray wing, a match to her own petrified leg. Then, a lotus flower, its petals a delicate white, would have a stamen folded from the dark, fibrous material of the Soul Grove's walls. She would place them at the edge of her pavilion, the still point, and they would sit there, inert, until the next day when she would replace them with new ones. Hinata, making her daily visit with tea, noticed first. The sculptures weren't just random. They were representational. It's the spire, Hinata said one afternoon, kneeling beside Conan as the older woman folded a new shape. It was a rough, jagged form, all sharp angles and dark paper. Conan's fingers paused. Is it? Her voice was its usual paper-soft monotone. It is. And that one from yesterday. Hinata pointed to a discarded, half-crumpled sculpture of a smooth sphere with a crack down the middle. That was the sealed scar in the grove. Conan looked at her work, then at Hinata. Her two-toned eyes held no understanding, only a passive observation. They are shapes. The city provides the paper. I fold. But why these shapes? Hinata pressed gently. Do you remember seeing them? I remember, shapes. Conan's brow furrowed, a minuscule crack in her placidity. In the dark place. With the whispers. There were, shapes. And cold. Hinata's blood chilled. Conan was unconsciously replicating elements of the whispering chasm, the sealed scar, the spire, the traumatic architecture of her new existence. It was a form of memory, leaking out through her art. She reported her findings at the next Sunset Council in the Coral Tower's meeting room, a space May had fashioned with a long table of polished dark wood and maps of Yuzushio etched onto luminous pearlescent sheets. She's processing the trauma, Kakashi concluded, leaning back in his chair. Non-verbally. Her conscious mind is still in that serene state, but her subconscious is trying to make sense of the attack. Kuratsuchi, examining a new alloy sample, grunted. So the paper statue is having nightmares. What of it? It's a data point, May said, steepling her fingers. Her crimson nails gleamed in the soft light. It proves the event left a psychic imprint. If it happened to her, it could happen to others. Her gaze slid to Naruto, who sat at the head of the table, silent and watchful. The stability of our minds is as important as the stability of the realm, Okami. We cannot govern if we are unraveling. I'm fine, Kuratsuchi snapped, but her hand tightened on the metal sample. Hinata looked down at her own hands. She had been having dreams too. Not of the chasm, but of a training ground in Konoha, of a boy with bright blonde hair who never turned around. Waking up in her Hyuga-style room was a disorientation that took minutes to shake off. It may not be just Conan, Hinata admitted softly. I have had echoes. Feelings that are not quite mine. A heavy silence fell over the table. The unspoken fear now had a shape, their borrowed lives were not sealed units. The barriers between their original memories and their current existence might be permeable. Naruto finally spoke, his voice low. The threads I pulled you from, they weren't severed cleanly. They were grafted. There's bleed through. The stronger the emotion tied to a memory, the more likely it is to seep. Wonderful, Kuratsuchi muttered. So we're not just prisoners, we're leaky prisoners. It's a manageable risk, Kakashi said, though his eye held concern. Mindfulness exercises. Grounding techniques. Focusing on the present, the tangible. He looked at Conan, who was staring out the window at the false sunset. Though for some, the present may be the problem. The meeting adjourned with a plan to monitor their own mental states. But plans, as they soon learned, were useless against the tides of stolen memory. The fracture happened not with Conan, nor Hinata, but in the last place anyone expected. 3 nights later, Naruto was drawn from a rare, light sleep by a sensation of intense, focused rage. It wasn't his own. It was a hot, metallic, and deeply personal fury that resonated through the city's connection to him. It came from the forge. He arrived in a flicker of indigo shadow to find the mountain entrance glowing a hellish orange. Not from the forge fires, but from molten stone. The cavern entrance was half collapsed, slagged and resolidified in chaotic waves. The air trembled with heat and the aftershock of tremendous force. Inside, the scene was one of apocalyptic industry gone wrong. Anvils were twisted. Tools were embedded in the walls. In the center of the devastation stood Kuratsuchi. She was breathing in great, heaving gulps, her face a mask of sweat, soot, and tear tracks cut through the grime. In her hands, she held not a hammer, but a jagged, glowing shard of the very rare alloy she'd been perfecting, now shattered. Her eyes were wide, unseeing, fixed on the far wall where she had, with terrifying precision, etched a series of deep, furious gouges into the stone. Not words. A symbol. The Iwagakure crest. But it was slashed through with a single, violent line, and surrounded by smaller, frantic markings that looked like tallies, or names. Kuratsuchi, Naruto said, keeping his voice calm. She didn't hear him. She whispered, her voice raw and guttural, traitors. In the council chamber. The scent of ozone and betrayal. They said I was too radical. That my methods would bring the other villages down on us. She flung the molten shard against the wall, where it splattered and cooled. My own people. After everything I built. After I pulled IWA from the rubble with my bare hands. This wasn't a memory of Yuzushio. This was a memory from her thread. The civil war. The ambush. The moment of ultimate betrayal that Naruto had snatched her from. Kuratsuchi, look at me, Naruto commanded, infusing his voice with a thread of his will. Her dark, furious eyes snapped to his. For a second, there was no recognition. Then, confusion warred with the rage. Uzumaki? What are you? Where is this? This isn't the Valley of Hell. This is my forge. She looked around at the destruction, her anger subsiding into dawning, horrified comprehension. My forge. In the fake place. The prison. The last word was a whisper of defeat. The rage was gone, replaced by a shuddering, full-body tremor. She sank to her knees amidst the wreckage of her work, the proud Tsuchikage brought low not by an enemy, but by a ghost in her own mind. Naruto approached slowly, as one would a wounded animal. He didn't touch her. He just sat on the heated stone floor a few feet away, saying nothing. After a long time, her trembling subsided. She spoke to the floor, her voice hollow. I felt it. The cold vote. The shifting eyes. I knew it was coming. I was preparing, and then I was here. In this beautiful, silent, nothing place. I thought I'd escaped it. But it followed me. She looked up, her eyes sharp with a new kind of pain. You didn't save me. You just postponed the knife. The memory of it is still in here. She tapped her temple. And it's sharper for being in this quiet place. There's nothing to drown it out. I'm sorry, Naruto said. The words were inadequate, but they were all he had. Sorry doesn't mend broken steel, she spat, but the venom was gone, replaced by exhaustion. What's the point? I build things here, but they're just distractions. The real fight, the real betrayal, it's over. I lost. I just didn't get to see the final blow. You're alive, he said. Am I? She gestured around at the molten, ruined cave. Is this living? Or is it just a longer form of dying? He had no answer. The memory thief had struck, not stealing a memory, but delivering one, fully formed and venomous. The ethical horror of his project was laid bare, he hadn't given them new lives. He had given them interludes, with the old wounds still festering underneath. The others arrived then, Hinata first, her Byakugan taking in the psychic residue of rage and memory, then Kakashi and Mei, who assessed the structural damage and the human damage with parallel efficiency. Episode of psychic feedback from her point of origin, Kakashi diagnosed quietly to Mei. Triggered by stress, isolation, perhaps the focus of her work. Can it happen again? Mei asked, her gaze on Kuratsuchi's hunched form. Almost certainly. For all of us. The memories are part of the graft. We can't remove them without unmaking the person. Mei's lips thinned. Then we must integrate them. Not as distractions, but as acknowledged history. She is not just a resident of Yuzushio. She is the Tsuchikage who was betrayed. That identity must have a place here, or it will destroy the one you've given her. She stepped forward, her crimson gown stark against the soot and slag. Kuratsuchi. Kuratsuchi didn't look up. Tsuchikage, Mei said, her voice firm, using the title like a command. Kuratsuchi's head lifted slightly. You were betrayed by the village you loved, Mei stated, no pity in her voice, only fact. That is a part of you. It is a weapon that can be turned inward, as you have seen, or outward. This realm has enemies, the silence, the void, the instability. We need that rage. But we need it focused. You want to build? Then build our defenses. Not trinkets, but weapons. Not for a village that cast you out, but for a realm that needs your strength. Let the memory of their betrayal be the fire that tempers your steel for our walls. It was a masterstroke. Mei was offering not therapy, but a purpose for the pain. A translation of old loyalty into new. Kuratsuchi stared at her, then let out a short, bitter laugh. You're good. You're really good, Terumi. It is why I am here, Mei replied simply. Slowly, Kuratsuchi pushed herself to her feet. She wiped her face with a grimy forearm, leaving a new streak. She looked at the ruined forge, at the slashed IWA symbol on the wall. All right, she said, her voice regaining some of its gravel. You want weapons? I'll build you weapons that would make my traitorous council shit themselves. But I want a real workshop. Bigger. Deeper. Access to the geothermal vents directly. And I want it called the Armory. Not the Forge. Granted, Naruto said immediately. And, Kuratsuchi added, her eyes locking with his, I want to see the blueprints for the city's energy grid. If I'm fortifying this place, I need to know what I'm fortifying. It was a demand for trust, for inclusion at the highest level. Naruto glanced at Kakashi, who gave a slight nod. Kakashi will provide you with everything we've mapped. Kuratsuchi gave a sharp, satisfied nod. The crisis had passed, transmuted from a breakdown into a negotiation. But the underlying problem remained. As they left Kuratsuchi to begin the grim, therapeutic work of clearing her own wreckage, Hinata fell into step beside Naruto. It will happen again, she said quietly. To me. To Kakashi-sensei. To her. She nodded towards Mei, who walked ahead, already dictating notes to a floating sheet of pearl parchment provided by the city. We all have our ghosts. In a place this quiet, they have room to speak. I know, Naruto said, the weight of it crushing. I thought I was building a sanctuary. I built an echo chamber. You built a place where broken things could be together, she corrected him gently. But broken things still have sharp edges. We will cut each other. And ourselves. She hesitated. My memories, they are quieter. Sadness, not rage. But they are there. A life of watching from the shadows. Sometimes, in my garden, I expect to see my father's disapproving face. I feel the ghost of the main house's walls. She stopped walking and turned to face him on the pristine street. The false stars were out. You cannot protect us from what we brought with us, Naruto. All you can do is what Mei did. Help us find a place for it. Help us use it to build this world, instead of letting it tear us apart. She reached out, and this time, he didn't flinch. She placed her hand over his heart, where the sealed scar in the grove resonated. You have the biggest ghost of all. And you're trying to build a city on top of it. It's no wonder the foundations are shaky. Her hand was warm. Her understanding was a balm and a burden. She saw him, not as a devil or a god, but as a man buried under an ocean of grief, trying to build a raft from the wreckage. He covered her hand with his own. It was the closest they had been since her arrival. I don't know how to help you, he admitted, the confession wrenched from him. Let us help each other, she said. And maybe, in doing that, we'll help you too. She withdrew her hand, gave him a small, sad smile, and continued towards her quarters. Naruto stood alone under the fake stars. The memory thief had struck, revealing the fatal flaw in his grand design. His brides were not empty vessels to be filled with his need. They were entire worlds of history and pain, and they had brought their weather with them. The silence of Uzushio was now filled with the silent screams of remembered betrayals, forgotten loves, and lives left dangling. He hadn't ended their pain. He had just given it a new, very quiet room to live in. And the only way forward was not to silence those ghosts, but to invite them to the table. Chapter 10, The Scout from the Roots. The Ink Panther moved through the shadows of New Uzushio with a predator's silence, a liquid black shape against the pearlescent gloom. Its eyes, yellow and unblinking, were not organs of sight, but of analysis. They recorded the impossible architecture, the stable, unnatural twilight, the complete absence of ambient wildlife or wind. The city wasn't just quiet, it was observing. In a hidden alcove overlooking the central plaza, the Panther's creator, Sai, exhaled slowly, maintaining the chakra link through sheer force of will. The distance was immense, the dimensional barrier a screaming wall of dissonance in his senses. Beside him, Ino Yamanaka, her blonde hair tied back in a severe knot, had her eyes closed, her consciousness partially riding the panther's perceptions. Anything? Sai asked, his voice a flat, controlled whisper. Nothing alive, Ino murmured, her brow furrowed. No heartbeats. No chakra signatures except a background hum. It's everywhere. In the stone, the air. It's like the whole place is a single, giant chakra entity. She grimaced. And it's sad. A deep, hollow sadness. Sai's brush moved over a fresh scroll, sketching the plaza with quick, precise strokes. Consistent with the residual energy from the dimensional tears. This is the source. The sanctuary the intercepted whispers spoke of. They were part of Root's last vine, a secret contingency cell formed by the remnants of Danzo's organization and allied intelligence operatives after the cataclysm, the event their world called the Great Silence, when whole regions simply vanished, leaving behind tears in reality and psychic scars. Kakashi Hatake, acting on his own intelligence, had been their best agent, their needle sent to find the haystack. He'd found it, sent one scrambled, warning burst, and then gone silent. Now it was their turn. Ino's eyes snapped open, a gasp escaping her lips. Movement. Northwest quadrant. A humanoid chakra signature. It's contained. Precise. Gentle. Hyuga type, but softer. Warmer. Sai's brush froze. A survivor? Or a prisoner? Ino's face hardened. We need a visual. Get the panther closer. Hinata felt the gaze. It was not the diffuse, ambient awareness of the city, nor Naruto's heavy, sorrowful attention. This was a pointed look. A professional, assessing stare that prickled the back of her neck as she pruned the luminescent blue memories lament flowers in her garden. Her Byakugan activated on reflex. She saw it instantly, a construct of dark, swirling ink, shaped like a big cat, clinging to the shadows of a coral-formed archway 50 meters away. Its chakra was complex, layered with fuinjutsu and a familiar, emotionless control she associated with Sai. Her heart leapt into her throat. Not her Sai. But a Sai. From a world like her original one. A scout. A wild, desperate hope surged. Contact. A link to the outside. A chance. Then the cold reality of her situation crashed down. This wasn't a rescue. This was reconnaissance. And if they were discovered by Naruto, or by Mei's newly organized watchfulness, what would happen? Would they be captured? Added to the collection? Or would Naruto, in a fit of protective paranoia, destroy them? The Ink Panther's head turned, its yellow eyes meeting the spot where she stood, as if it sensed her activation of the Byakugan. It melted back into a puddle of shadow and began to flow away, towards the mountains. Towards the armory. Towards Kuratsuchi. Hinata didn't think. She moved. She couldn't use the body flicker, the chakra flare would be a beacon. But the gentle fist taught economy of movement, silent grace. She flowed over her garden wall and into the streets, keeping to the soft edges of the buildings, her Byakugan tracking the Ink Panther's cold, distinctive chakra as it sped north. She had to warn Kuratsuchi. That Tsuchikage was in a volatile state, her nerves raw from the memory episode. A surprise scout from her past life could trigger another breakdown, or a violent response that would bring the entire city down on them. Kuratsuchi was not in the main cavern of the newly expanded armory. She was in a side chamber, a vault-like room where she was testing the tensile strength of a new, dark gray alloy against a hydraulic press of her own design. The air smelled of hot metal and ozone. She was focused, her earlier rage channeled into the steady, grinding pressure of the machine. So focused, she didn't sense the ink until it was inside the room. The panther reformed from a crack under the door, slinking along the wall. Its analytical eyes swept over the unfamiliar technology, the geological samples, the woman in work clothes operating machinery with a scowl of intense concentration. Kuratsuchi felt a presence. Her earth-nature senses, attuned to vibrations, felt the wrongness, a liquid, silent step on her stone floor. She turned off the press with a savage twist of a valve and whirled around. She and the Ink Panther stared at each other. Every muscle in Kuratsuchi's body locked. That style. Root. Danzo's dogs. In her space. In her sanctuary. The betrayal on her own world had been internal, but Root had always been Konoha's hidden knife, a symbol of the external treachery and cold pragmatism she despised. Rage, clean and hot and simple, blasted away her caution. She didn't yell. She attacked. Doton, Iwa Shuriken. Rocks tore themselves from the walls, sharpening in midair into a storm of stone projectiles that shredded through the Ink Panther. It dissolved into a splash of black fluid. But it was a construct. Its destruction told its creator everything. Shit, Kuratsuchi hissed, realizing her mistake. She'd confirmed a hostile presence, revealed her location and her capabilities. Idiot. She was thinking like a wronged Tsuchikage, not like a defender of a secret realm. The door to the vault burst open. Hinata stood there, breathless. They saw you. An ink construct, size work. I know what it was. Kuratsuchi snapped, already striding towards the main cavern. We have to find the source. If it's a scout, there's a controller nearby, probably at the dimensional weak point they came through. We should tell Naruto. Or Kakashi. And have our only link to the outside vaporized or added to his menagerie? Kuratsuchi shot her a fierce look. No. This is our play. We intercept. We talk. We find out what's happening out there. It's too dangerous, Hinata pleaded. Everything here is dangerous. Kuratsuchi stopped, gripping Hinata's shoulders. Listen. This could be our only chance. A chance to get a message out. To understand what happened when we were plucked. To maybe, find a way to exist that isn't just this. She gestured at the beautiful, suffocating city. We handle it. Clean. Quiet. Then we decide what to do with the information. Hinata saw the desperate hope in the other woman's eyes, mirroring her own. The hope of a prisoner seeing a crack in the wall. She nodded. All right. But we do it smart. Where would they be? The breach would be at the reality seam, came a dry voice from the entrance. Kakashi leaned against the doorway, his arms crossed. He looked tired. The panther's destruction sent a feedback pulse. I felt it from the archive. You two are thinking of going rogue. You're one to talk, Ghost, Kuratsuchi retorted, but her defiance was weakened. I didn't go rogue. I went missing in action to gather intelligence. Which is what I've been doing. He pushed off the doorframe. The scout is from my world's contingency team. Sai and Ino, most likely. They're good. Careful. They won't have come in force, it's a probe. The breach will be minimal, likely in the lower southern sector, where the Grove's influence is weakest. It's where I arrived. You knew they'd come? Hinata asked. I hoped they were smart enough to follow the trail. I didn't hope they'd be stupid enough to send a panther into the Tsuchikage's weapons lab. He fixed Kuratsuchi with a look. Your little display just confirmed this location holds hostile, high-level shinobi. They'll be on highest alert. So we go now, Kuratsuchi said. Before they report back. We do, Kakashi agreed. But not like a bull in a china shop. We go to talk. And you, he pointed at Kuratsuchi, will let me do the talking. Your diplomatic skills currently involve hydraulic presses and rock shuriken. Grudgingly, she nodded. The breach was exactly where Kakashi predicted, a faint, shimmering irregularity in the air at the edge of the city, where the pearlescent streets met a sheer cliff overlooking the false ocean. It looked like a heat haze, but it buzzed with a familiar, painful frequency. Sai and Ino were there, already packing their gear. They'd felt the panther's destruction. The mission was compromised, extraction was protocol. They froze as three figures emerged from the city's glow, Kakashi, looking older and wearier than they remembered, a Hyuga woman they didn't recognize, her expression anxious, and the fourth Tsuchikage, her gaze like granite. Ino. Sai, Kakashi said, his voice calm. Stand down. It's not what you think. Ino's hands were already in a seal, her mind-body switch technique at the ready. Sai had two scrolls unrolled, ink beasts quivering at the edges. Kakashi Taishu? Ino's voice was strained. Your signal cut off. We thought you were dead. Or compromised. I am both, depending on your definition, Kakashi said, raising his hands peacefully. This place, it's a sanctuary, but it's also a prison. These two are residents. They are not hostages in the traditional sense. And the entity that rules here, he is not an enemy in the way you believe. Entity? Sai's brush was poised. The city's chakra signature is monolithic. A consciousness. He is a man who lost everything, Hinata spoke up, her voice soft but clear. He built this place from his grief. He brought us here, to quiet the silence. He means no harm. He kidnapped you, Ino stated, her eyes flicking between Hinata and Kuratsuchi. From your worlds. We've been tracking the tears. The stolen threads. He saved me from a coup that would have killed me, Kuratsuchi ground out. And her from a life of. She glanced at Hinata. Of irrelevance. It's not clean. It's not right. But it's not simple malice. Kakashi took a step forward. The situation is stable, for now. The entity, his name is Naruto Uzumaki, a version of him from a dead world, is manageable. He's listening. He's trying to do better. Your incursion threatens that stability. If he feels threatened, he will defend this place with power you cannot comprehend. It would be a catastrophe. So what's the play, sir? Sai asked, ever practical. We can't just leave. The breach is a threat to our world. The cataclysm is spreading. Then we manage the breach, Kakashi said. You report back that the source is contained, but volatile. That I am in place, monitoring. That direct intervention would be disastrous. You establish a communication protocol. A safe, minimal link. We become the bridge. Not an invasion force, but a diplomatic outpost. Ino slowly lowered her hands, her mind racing. The council will never agree. They'll want it neutralized. Then you convince them, Kakashi said, his single eye intense. Tell them the god has a court. And the court is willing to talk. We are the leverage. The human element they didn't account for. There was a long silence, broken only by the hum of the breach and the distant, fake sigh of the ocean. Who's we? Ino asked, looking at Hinata and Kuratsuchi. Hinata bowed slightly. Hinata Hyuga. Of this place. Kuratsuchi, of the armory. And there are two others. A neutral party, and a politician. A court, Sai repeated, the concept fascinating his analytical mind. Fractured loyalties. Internal politics. A leverage point. Exactly, Kakashi said. Go back. Report. Tell them the ghost is in the machine, and he's not alone. We'll keep this breach point stable for controlled, scheduled communication. No more scout panthers. Ino exchanged a long look with Sai. Finally, she nodded. Acknowledged. We'll try. The council, it's not the old days. There's fear. They may not listen. Do your best, Kakashi said. Our survival may depend on it. All of our survivals. With one last, lingering look at the three of them, the lost Hokage, the gentle Hyuga, the hardened Tsuchikage, Sai and Ino activated their extraction Fuinjutsu. The shimmering breach flared, enveloped them, and then snapped shut, leaving the air clean and empty. The three stood in the sudden silence. Well, Kuratsuchi let out a long breath. That was something. We've just committed treason against our captor, for the sake of our old world, Hinata said, the reality dawning on her. Not treason, Kakashi corrected, turning back towards the city lights. Contingency planning. We've just given ourselves a backdoor. And we've given Naruto something he desperately needs without knowing it, a connection to the outside that isn't a theft. A choice. They walked back into the heart of Uzushio, the weight of their secret a new, shared burden. They were no longer just prisoners or residents. They were agents. A fifth column in the devil's paradise. In the coral tower, Mei Terumi stood on her balcony, having felt the distant, foreign chakra signatures and their departure. A slow, calculating smile spread across her lips. So, she thought, the kingdom has mice in the walls. And the mice are making deals with the world outside. She saw not a threat, but an opportunity. Leverage within leverage. Politics on a multidimensional scale. And in the Keystone Spire, Naruto stirred from his meditation, a faint, discordant echo at the edge of his perception, a tear that had opened and closed too neatly to be natural. A whisper of familiar, root-style chakra. He felt a pang of something new, not grief, not guilt, but suspicion. The scout from the roots had come and gone. They had left no physical trace. But they had planted a seed. A seed of doubt, of possibility, of connection. The silent, beautiful cage now had a key hidden within it. The only question was who would find it first. Chapter 11, The Symphony of Wrath. The scheduled communication from the outside was a week away. In the interim, the tension in Uzushio was a physical thing, a wire pulled taut across the Pearl and Coral City. Kakashi and the two women walked on eggshells, jumping at shadows. The secret they held was a live grenade. Hinata flinched every time Naruto's diffuse awareness brushed over her. Kuratsuchi threw herself into her work with a manic, almost desperate energy, the sound of her hammers ringing through the mountain like a frantic heartbeat. Mei watched it all with the serene focus of a chess master. She said nothing, but her council meetings became more pointed. She requested updates on perimeter security and resource contingency planning. She asked Kuratsuchi for theoretical weapon yields against ethereal, non-corporeal threats. She asked Kakashi to review the city's foundational fuinjutsu, theoretically, of course. Naruto felt the shift. The city, an extension of his soul, echoed with the unspoken anxiety of its inhabitants. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore, it was hushed. He walked the streets, the perfect, soft light feeling sterile and false. He visited Konan at her Still Point Pavilion. She was folding a new sculpture, a delicate, multi-layered sphere with a tiny, intricate door. "What is it?" he asked. "A possibility," she replied in her papery voice. "Many layers. One way in or out." It felt like an omen. The attack did not come from the breach in the south. It came from above. There was no warning siren, no crack in the sky. One moment, the perpetual twilight was its usual bruised purple. The next, the dome of the pocket dimension rippled, like a stone dropped into a pond made of firmament. A sound followed, not a boom, but a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated in the bones, in the teeth, in the very chakra of the city. In the keystone spire, Naruto's head snapped up. His star-pitted eyes widened. He felt it, a pressure, a foreign will pressing against the skin of his world. Not the gentle, desperate probe of Sai and Ino. This was a spear tip. An invasion vector. Alarms, designed by May and implemented by a grudgingly cooperative city, lit up across the spires, not with sound, but with pulses of crimson light. The silent alarm. They converged in the central plaza, Naruto from his spire, a cloak of indigo and black already swirling around him, May from the coral tower, dressed not in silk but in a form-fitting, articulated armor of dark red lacquer, Kakashi from the archive, a dozen scrolls strapped to his back, Kuratsuchi from the armory, covered in soot and carrying a massive, unadorned hammer of her new alloy, Hinata from her garden, her Byakugan active, veins bulging as she scanned the rippling sky. Konan did not come. She remained at her pavilion, watching the sky, her hands still folding paper. "Report." May's voice cut through the ominous thrumming. "Single point of ingress." Kakashi shouted, his eye narrowed at the epicenter of the ripple, directly above the plaza. "Dimensional breaching charge. High yield. They're not probing, they're punching through." "The council," Kuratsuchi snarled. "They didn't listen." "Who are they?" Naruto asked, his voice cold, the echoes in it flattening into a single, deadly tone. "Root's last vine," Kakashi said. "Elite Ops. They think this place is a tumor. They're here to cut it out." The ripple became a tear. A jagged, bleeding wound of harsh white light tore open in the sky. Through it descended not an army, but a formation. 9 shinobi, moving as one. They wore modified root armor, sleek and gray, faces obscured by featureless masks. Their chakra signatures were suppressed, disciplined, and interlinked, a single, multi-limbed organism of lethal intent. They landed in a perfect circle in the plaza, their arrival scattering no dust, making no sound beyond the fading hum of the breach. The leader, a tall figure with a long blade strapped to his back, raised a hand. The other 8 fanned out, hands moving in synchronized seals. Barrier formation, 8 trigrams sealing style, variant, the leader intoned, his voice filtered and metallic. 8 pillars of light erupted around the plaza, slamming into the ground and curving into a dome, sealing the area. The air inside grew heavy, oppressive. Kakashi hissed. "They've locked down space. No teleportation out. They mean to contain and eliminate." The lead agent's mask turned towards Naruto. "Entity designated Okami. You are an unauthorized reality anomaly. You have unlawfully detained sentient beings from multiple streams. You will stand down and submit to dimensional collapse. The extracted individuals will be processed for reintegration or retirement." His words were bureaucracy given voice. They held no hate, no fear. Just cold, procedural finality. Naruto took a step forward. The plaza stones trembled. "This is my home. These are my people. You will leave." The lead agent tilted his head. "Negative. You have no legal standing. You are a wound. We are the cauterization." He made a simple, cutting gesture with his hand. "Execute." 4 of the agents broke from the circle, blurring towards Naruto. Their movements were flawless, efficient. Kunai laced with glowing, space-disrupting seals filled the air. Naruto didn't dodge. He flickered. Not the body flicker technique. He ceased to be in one place and was in another, leaving behind afterimages of indigo smoke. The kunai passed through empty air. He reappeared behind the lead agent. His hand, wreathed in dark energy, reached for the man's neck. A barrier of solid light snapped up, deflecting his touch with a screech of protesting physics. Two other agents were already there, their taijutsu a blur of precise, killing strikes aimed at pressure points that would shatter bone and disrupt chakra in a normal opponent. Naruto wasn't normal. He let the strikes land. They impacted his inverted cloak and stalled, their kinetic energy dissipating into the hungry void of his power. The agents' eyes behind their masks widened a fraction in the first sign of surprise. "My turn," Naruto whispered. He didn't form a Rasengan. He willed one into existence. A sphere of compressed, howling silence and indigo lightning appeared in his palm. He thrust it forward. The two agents crossed their arms, activating a tandem barrier. The silent Rasengan struck. It didn't explode. It unmade. The barrier dissolved into glittering motes. The agents were thrown back, their armor cracking, lines of null energy crawling over them like black frost. They hit the ground and didn't move, not dead, but utterly, terrifyingly inert. The lead agent didn't flinch. Target demonstrates high-level reality manipulation. Adjust strategy. Prioritize extraction of assets. Eliminate hostiles. The remaining agents shifted. Two broke towards Kakashi, two towards Kuratsuchi, one towards Hinata. The leader and one other focused on Naruto. "Like hell!" Kuratsuchi roared. She slammed her hammer into the ground. "Doton, Doriyahiki!" But the earth didn't just rise, it erupted in a wave of jagged, superheated stone and metal shrapnel, a physical manifestation of her pent-up fury. The two agents closing on her were forced to scatter, their flawless formation broken. Kakashi was a ghost. He met his two opponents not with a Chidori, but with a blinding fast series of substitutions and genjutsu layered over fuinjutsu tags. He wasn't trying to kill, he was trying to trap, to confuse. One agent slashed through a mirage of Kakashi only to find his legs entangled in chakra suppression wire that hadn't been there a second before. Hinata faced her single opponent. He was fast, his style a ruthless blend of assassination techniques. She fell into the gentle fist, her movements a flowing dance of defense. Her Byakugan saw everything, the minute tensing of his muscles, the flow of his chakra to his limbs. She deflected a knife hand strike, landed two precise taps on his wrist, disrupting the chakra there. He staggered, his hand going numb. For a moment, behind the mask, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition. Of a Hyuga fighting style from a dead clan. But the main event was in the center. The lead agent and his partner fought Naruto not with ninjutsu, but with conceptual weapons. One wielded a blade that left trails of frayed reality in its wake. The other used fuinjutsu seals that projected fields of normalization, patches of space that tried to reassert the laws of a standard universe, causing Naruto's inverted cloak to sputter and fray at the edges. Naruto fought back not with the city's power, but with a terrifying, personalized artistry. He didn't just warp reality, he composed with it. A snap of his fingers turned the air around an agent to solid crystal, which he then shattered with a glance, the sharpnel hanging in the air before shooting forward. He pointed, and gravity reversed in a 10-foot sphere around the lead agent, who adapted instantly, using chakra to walk on the ceiling of the inverted field. It was beautiful and horrible, a symphony of wrath conducted by a grieving god. But Naruto was holding back. He could feel the fragility of his world. A full unleashing of his power could shatter the pocket dimension like a glass ball. Mei saw it too. She hadn't engaged directly. She was at the edge of the sealed dome, her hands flying through seals of her own. Kuratsuchi. The barrier pillars. Their anchor points, now. Kuratsuchi disengaged from her dodging opponents, took a running leap, and brought her hammer down on one of the light pillars with a sound like a gong being struck by a mountain. The pillar flickered. The lead agent, still dueling Naruto in his inverted gravity field, barked a command. "Secure the perimeter." One of the agents fighting Kakashi broke away, launching a volley of chakra disruptor darts at Kuratsuchi. Hinata, seeing it, intercepted. 8 trigrams 64 palms. She became a whirlwind, deflecting every dart, her palms a blur. But it left her open. Her original opponent lunged, a chakra blade aiming for her kidney. A sheet of water, hard as steel, intercepted the blade. Mei stood there, one hand extended, the other still weaving seals. "No one harms my assets without my permission," she said coolly, and the water whip around her arm lashed out, forcing the agent back. The battle became a chaotic melee. Kakashi had successfully sealed one agent in a fuinjutsu bind. Kuratsuchi, with Hinata's cover, smashed a second pillar. The dome flickered, grew unstable. The lead agent saw the tide turning. His mission was failing. He made a decision. He disengaged from Naruto, falling back to the center of the plaza. He pulled a scroll from his belt, a small, black thing that hummed with catastrophic energy. Scorch Protocol, he stated. Contain dimensional collapse. Purge the anomaly. No. Kakashi yelled, recognizing the technology. It was a bomb designed not to explode, but to violently unstitch a localized reality. Naruto felt it, a pinpoint of infinite hunger, a sibling to the void maw. It would eat Uzushio from the inside out. All hesitation left him. The fear of breaking his world was overridden by the need to save it. He stopped composing. He stopped holding back. He unfurled. His indigo cloak exploded outwards, not as an attack, but as a claim. It swallowed the light of the barrier dome, swallowed the sound of battle, swallowed the very concept of the space they were in. For a moment, everyone, friend and foe, saw not Naruto, but an absence shaped like a man, with eyes that were windows into the void between stars. He looked at the black scroll in the lead agent's hand. And he said one word, layered with the weight of a dead universe, mine. The scroll didn't activate. It inverted. The symbols on its surface rewrote themselves, the catastrophic energy flowing backwards, into Naruto. He didn't absorb it, he integrated it. The scroll turned to dust. Then, he turned his gaze to the agents. He didn't kill them. He didn't have to. He edited them. With a wave of his hand, the space around each of the 9 root agents simplified. The complex, interlinked chakra networks that made them elite shinobi were gently, irrevocably unraveled. Their memories of this place, of their mission, were lifted from their minds like pages from a book. Their armor lost its cohesion, becoming simple gray cloth. Their masks became featureless porcelain. They stood, dazed and ordinary, their will to fight, their very identities as weapons, gone. Edited out of the narrative. The lead agent stared at his empty hands, then at Naruto, his mind a clean, confused slate. Who? You are lost, Naruto said, his voice now empty of wrath, just profoundly tired. You will be returned. He looked up at the fraying tear in the sky. With a thought, he mended it, the fabric of reality knitting itself seamlessly back together. Then, he opened a new, gentle portal at the edge of the plaza, a doorway showing a familiar, war-torn landscape from their home dimension. Go home. You have no business here. The agents, now just confused men and women, stumbled through the portal one by one. It closed behind the last of them. The silence that followed was absolute. The dome was gone. The plaza was pristine, untouched, except for the 2 agents lying inert, covered in black frost. Naruto's cloak settled. He looked at his hands, then at the others. Kakashi was pale. Kuratsuchi's hammer hung loosely at her side. Hinata's Byakugan was deactivated, her eyes wide with awe and terror. Mei's expression was unreadable, a mix of stark appraisal and something like hunger. He had won. Not with brute force, but with a terrifying, godlike authorship. He had rewritten their enemies out of the story. But the cost was written on his face. The star-pitted eyes were dimmer. The effort, the use of that depth of power, had drained something essential from him. He swayed on his feet. Hinata was at his side in an instant, supporting his arm. He felt her warmth, her solid, real presence. He leaned on her, just a little. The symphony is over, Mei announced, her voice cutting through the shock. We have prisoners. She nodded to the 2 frozen agents. Intel. And we have a demonstration. Her eyes met Naruto's. The kingdom has teeth. Now the outside world knows it. Kakashi walked over to the inert forms, checking for pulses. He found weak, sluggish heartbeats. They're in stasis. A living null state. He looked at Naruto with new, profound wariness. You could do that to any of us. Naruto met his gaze. I won't. You just did it without a second thought. To protect you. The words were simple, honest, and carried the weight of his entire broken purpose. The statement hung in the air. The devil had fought for his stolen people. He had wielded cosmic power not to enslave them further, but to defend the cage they shared. It changed everything. And nothing. They were still prisoners. He was still a broken god. But the bars of the cage, they now understood, looked both ways. The symphony of wrath was over. The echoes of its terrible, beautiful music would reverberate through Uzushio for a long, long time. Chapter 12, The Sun's Shadow. The 2 frozen root agents were sealed in a stasis chamber deep beneath the armory, a joint project by Kakashi's Fuinjutsu and Kuratsuchi's most secure alloys. They were less prisoners, more frozen specimens of a failed experiment. Their presence was a cold stone in the gut of the city, a reminder of the violence that had brushed against their fragile world. But the real aftershock of the invasion was not in the plaza, nor in the dungeon. It was in Naruto. The effort of rewriting 9 elite shinobi, of absorbing a dimensional collapse bomb, of mending the sky, it had cost him. The indigo energy of his cloak seemed thinner, the star-pitted eyes sometimes flickering like a guttering candle. He spent more time in the Soul Grove, not gardening, but simply sitting before the sealed scar, as if drawing strength from the memorial to his own despair. And the city, ever the mirror of its creator, began to yearn. It wasn't a conscious desire, but a gravitational pull from the deepest, most wounded shard of Naruto's soul. The shard that had screamed for years into the void left by a single person. The shard shaped like a brother, a rival, a friend, a shadow. Sasuke. He tried to resist. The horror of the corrupted Sakura bloom was a fresh wound. The ethical abyss of summoning another echo yawned before him. But the need was a physical ache, a phantom limb that throbbed in the silence left by the battle's adrenaline. The others had proven themselves, allies, even friends. But they weren't him. They couldn't fill that specific, Sasuke-shaped hole in the universe. It happened in a moment of weakness. He was in the grove, his hand resting on the pulsing wall, feeling the slow, sickly heartbeat of his creation. A wave of loneliness, so profound it was nausea, washed over him. He thought of the final battle in the Valley of the End, of blood and lightning and a bond forged in hatred and understanding. He thought of a single, spared glance of sorrow before the unmaking. He didn't form a request. He let out a silent scream of want. The wall convulsed. A bloom, unlike any other, erupted with violent speed. It was not a flower of delicate petals, but a jagged, geometric burst of black and violet light, like a negative image of a Sharingan. It crackled with lightning chakra and the scent of ozone and blood. It pulsed once, twice, and then tore open, not a portal, but a rend. From it fell a figure, crumpling to the fibrous floor in a heap of dark fabric and tangled, long hair. Naruto rushed forward, his heart a wild drum in his chest. He knelt, turning the figure over. It was Sasuke. But wrong. The face was softer, the lines less harsh. The hair was longer, silken black, falling past slender shoulders. The body under the familiar, high-collared cloak was slighter, curved. This was not the Sasuke he knew. This was a Sasuke Uchiha from a branch of reality where the fundamental twist of fate had been different. A world where Sasuke was born female. Her eyes fluttered open. Dark, onyx eyes, not yet holding the Sharingan's curse. They were confused, disoriented, then sharpened with instinctual wariness. She tried to push herself up, her gaze locking on Naruto's star-pitted eyes. "Who are you?" Her voice was lower than a woman's typical pitch, husky with disuse and a familiar, underlying intensity. "Where is this?" Naruto could only stare, his mind reeling. This was his shadow? This was the echo he had called? A woman wearing his best friend's face, his aura, his chakra signature, a chilling, beautiful perversion of his memory. He began, but no words came. Sasuke, she, scrambled back, her movements graceful and lethal, falling into a defensive stance. Her Sharingan activated with a ripple of crimson, the tomo spinning. She took in the pulsing, organic horror of the Soul Grove, the other dormant blooms, the sealed scar. Her eyes widened in horror that was both alien and heartbreakingly familiar. "What is this place?" "Your chakra, it's a void. It's wrong." Her Sharingan analyzed, dissected. "You're not human. What did you do to me?" "I brought you here," Naruto managed, his own voice a dry rasp. To be safe." "Safe?" She let out a short, sharp laugh that was pure, undiluted Sasuke, regardless of gender. "This place reeks of death and stolen things. I am not safe. I am trapped." Her Sharingan fixed on a nearby, wilted bloom, a remnant of the chasm's attack. "You're a collector. A thief of people." The accuracy of her assessment, delivered with that cold, Uchiha clarity, was a lance through him. "It's not like that." "Then explain." She didn't lower her guard. "And do it quickly. My last memory is of the Kage summit. Of diplomacy. Then, nothing. A pull. And now I'm here, in the belly of some thing." Her gaze swept over him again, dripping with contempt. "You wear a Hokage's cloak, but you're a monster." Each word was a hammer blow. This wasn't the gentle confusion of Hinata, the furious negotiation of Kuratsuchi, the serene acceptance of Konan, or the political calculation of Mei. This was recognition. This Sasuke saw him, instantly and completely, for what he was. And she judged him with the full, unforgiving weight of the Uchiha name. He was not her friend. He was not her rival. He was her jailer. And she would never, ever pretend otherwise. He led her out of the grove, her following at a wary distance. The arrival of a new bride had become a sort of grim ritual. The others gathered in the plaza, drawn by the disturbance. Hinata's hand flew to her mouth. Kuratsuchi let out a low whistle. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Kakashi simply closed his eye, a profound weariness settling on his shoulders. Naruto, what have you done? Mei's eyebrows rose, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing her features before she schooled them into analytical calm. Sasuke, they had no other name for her, surveyed them all, her Sharingan memorizing every detail. A court of stolen people, she stated, her voice flat. The Hyuga heiress. The Tsuchikage. The paper woman. The Mizukage. And the ghost Hokage. She looked at Kakashi. You seem to have your faculties. Why do you serve this thing? I don't serve him, Kakashi said calmly. I'm trying to prevent him, and this place, from causing more damage. You're part of that damage now. TCH. She turned her burning gaze back to Naruto. So. Your collection is complete? Or will you keep fishing in the river of other people's lives? Enough, Naruto said, the word cracking with a hint of his power. The plaza stones shivered. You will be given quarters. You will be treated with respect. This is your home now. It will never be my home, she spat. I am Sasuke Uchiha. My home is a compound of ashes and a legacy of fire. This, pretty shell is a tomb. And you are its ghoul. She turned and walked away, not waiting to be shown. The city, responsive to Naruto's will, formed a path for her, leading to an empty spire on the western edge, as far from the keystone as possible. She took it, her back straight, alone, dark figure consumed by proud, furious hate. Naruto watched her go, and something in him finally, truly, broke. Not with a scream, but with a silent shatter. The last illusion, that he could rebuild something of his old life, that these echoes could somehow approximate the relationships he'd lost, evaporated. In Sasuke's female, contemptuous eyes, he saw the ultimate reflection of his sin. He had not preserved a memory. He had created a living insult to it. He didn't return to his spire. He walked to the training ground Hinata used. He stood in the center, under the false sky. Come out, he said, his voice echoing in the empty space. From the shadows of a nearby archway, the female Sasuke emerged. She had changed into simpler, dark clothes, her hair tied back. Her Sharingan was active. She said nothing. You want to understand what I am? Naruto said, not looking at her. You want to see the monster? Then fight me. I don't fight for your amusement, she said coldly. You fight for your truth. So do I. He finally turned to face her. His indigo cloak lay dormant. He held up his empty hands. No reality warping. No godhood. Just you and me. Taijutsu. Ninjutsu. Whatever you have. Show me the strength of the Uchiha you are. Show me what I tried to steal. For a long moment, she just stared. Then, a slow, fierce smile touched her lips, a smile he had seen 1,000 times on a different face, in a different life. It was the smile before a storm. Very well, monster. Let's dance. She moved first, a blur of speed that would have been impressive in any world. A kunai was in her hand, aimed for his throat. Naruto blocked, the impact solid, physical. He fell back into the familiar, brawling style of his youth, adapted to his stronger, current body. They clashed, kicks and punches ringing out in the silent arena. She was brilliant. Her style was a fluid, deadly fusion of the Uchiha's traditional Kenjutsu base and her own adaptations. She used her smaller size and speed, striking like a viper, using Sharingan precinct to predict his heavier blows. She feinted, spun, landed a solid kick to his ribs that made him grunt. He didn't hold back his physical strength. He pressed her, his attacks a relentless barrage meant to overwhelm. She parried, dodged, used substitution when she had to, a log shattered by his fist. You're holding back, she accused, breathing hard, her Sharingan spinning wildly. Use your power. Show me the void. I told you, he growled, sweeping a leg at her ankles which she narrowly jumped over. This is it. Liar. She formed hand seals, fast as thought. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu. A massive fireball, hotter and more focused than any he'd seen from his Sasuke, roared towards him. He didn't dodge. He took it, crossing his arms, letting the flames wash over him. His cloak absorbed the heat, the void energy drinking the chakra. He walked through the inferno, his clothes smoldering but his skin unburnt. She didn't falter. As the fire cleared, she was already in the air above him. Chidori. Lightning screeched in her palm, 1,000 birds crying out. It was a perfect replica, a violet-white spear of vengeance. It pierced his guard, aimed straight for his heart. He didn't try to stop it with power. At the last second, he moved, letting it slice across his chest instead of through it. The lightning scored a deep, burning gash, and the pain was glorious. It was real. It was a consequence. He staggered back, clutching the wound. Indigo-tinged blood, thick and slow, seeped between his fingers. She landed, the Chidori fading from her hand, her Sharingan wide. She stared at the blood, at his pained expression. You let me hit you. I told you, he gasped, a real, human sound of pain. Just you and me. Why? The question was a whisper, her fury momentarily banked by confusion. Because I deserve it, he said, his voice cracking. And because he, the Sasuke I knew, he would have been the one to give it to me. To make me face what I've become. The fight left her. The Sharingan deactivated, leaving her dark eyes pools of conflicted shadow. She looked at the blood on his chest, then at her own hand, as if it belonged to a stranger. You're not trying to replace him with me. No, he said, sinking to his knees, the adrenaline fading, leaving the raw, ugly truth. I can't. You're not him. You're a reminder of how far I've fallen. A mirror that shows me the perversion of my wish. He looked up at her, his star-pitted eyes filled not with cosmic power, but with human agony. I'm sorry, Sasuke. For pulling you from your life. For making you a symbol in my tragedy. You're right. I'm a thief. And a ghoul. She stood over him, her expression unreadable. The proud, furious Uchiha was gone, replaced by something more complex. She saw not a god, but a broken man kneeling in his own imagined graveyard, bleeding from a wound she had given him. The Sasuke of your world, she said slowly. What was he to you? My other half, Naruto whispered, the confession torn from the deepest part of him. My brother. The only one who understood the weight of the past. The one I fought, saved, and who saved me. I lost him. I lost everything. And in my madness, I thought if I could just have a piece of him back. You can't, she stated, not with cruelty, but with a finality that was its own kind of mercy. He's gone. I am not him. I will never be him. My life, my struggles, my gender, they are my own. You have not saved a piece of your friend. You have kidnapped a woman who shares his name and his eyes, and you have made her a prisoner of your grief. He bowed his head. I know. The silence stretched. The wind, a fake simulation, stirred their hair. What happens now? She asked. You stay. Or you go. I could try to send you back. The thread might still be there. And if it isn't? Then you're trapped. With the rest of us. She looked around at the beautiful, false city, then down at the bleeding devil at her feet. A strange, hollow laugh escaped her. Trapped with a monster who bleeds and begs for forgiveness. With a court of ghosts and politicians. It's not the fate I envisioned. She knelt then, in front of him. Not in submission. In confrontation. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the bleeding Chidori wound on his chest. She didn't touch it. I will stay. Not for you. Not as your shadow or your bride. But because this experiment of yours is the most consequential thing happening in any dimension right now. The Uchiha seek truth. And the truth of what you are, what this place is, and what it might become, that is a truth worth witnessing. Even from inside a cage. She stood. Have your people tend to that wound. It will fester if left in this unclean air. She turned to leave, then paused. And Naruto? He looked up. Don't ever look at me and see him again. My name is Sasuke. See me. Or don't look at me at all. She walked away, leaving him kneeling in the training ground, his blood dripping onto the perfect, unfeeling earth. The sun's shadow had been summoned. And in her blazing, unforgiving light, Naruto had finally seen the full, horrific extent of his own darkness. He had not gained a comrade. He had gained a judge. And in her refusal to play the role of his lost friend, she had, in a way, given him the only gift she could, the brutal, shattering gift of reality. Chapter 13, The Hearth and the Abyss. The bleeding stopped. The Chidori scar on Naruto's chest, cauterized by lightning and void energy, healed into a twisted, silvery knot over his heart, a permanent brand from his shadow. The pain lingered, a dull, grounding ache. He wore it not as a wound, but as a reminder. A receipt for his sin, paid in blood and truth. Sasuke, no last name offered, no title accepted, settled into the western spire, which the city, with an uncharacteristic lack of poetry, left as a simple, severe structure of dark stone. She kept to herself. Her presence was a low, constant hum of intense chakra and sharper intellect at the edge of the city's awareness. She did not attend May's sunset councils. She did not visit the gardens or the forge. She was an observer, a satellite in a fixed, disapproving orbit. And yet, her arrival had a paradoxical effect. The previous tensions, the secret of the rude incursion, the memory episodes, the political maneuvering, seemed to diminish, not in importance, but in scale. Compared to the raw, ontological horror of her summoning, their problems felt almost mundane. Almost human. It was Hinata who, perhaps inspired by Sasuke's brutal clarity, decided to force a new kind of normal. She did not ask permission. She simply acted. One morning, as the fabricated sun lightened the purple sky to lavender, she appeared at the entrance to the armory. Kuratsuchi was wrist-deep in calibrating a new geothermal regulator, her face smudged with grease. "We're having dinner," Hinata announced. Kuratsuchi didn't look up. "I'm busy. At sunset. In the central plaza. I'm cooking. You're coming." That made Kuratsuchi pause. She looked at Hinata, seeing the quiet, unshakable determination in her lavender eyes. It was the same look she'd had when facing down the whispering chasm. Cooking? With what? The city's pretend food? With real ingredients. I've been cultivating a garden plot. Radishes, onions, herbs. The city provides clean water. We have salt from the simulated sea edge. Kakashi-sensei found a strain of edible fungus in the lower caves. And you, Hinata pointed a finger at the Tsuchikage, will provide rice. Kuratsuchi blinked. Rice? You're the one with the controlled geothermal vents. You can make a steam box. Figure it out. Hinata turned to leave. Sunset. Don't be late. She visited the Coral Tower next. May was in her strategy room, reviewing glowing maps of the city's energy flows. Dinner, Hinata said. Plaza. Sunset. You're invited. May glanced up, a bemused smile on her lips. A social engagement? How quaint. What's the agenda, Lady Hyuga? No agenda. We eat. Together. Intriguing. And what is my contribution to this, potluck? Conversation, Hinata said simply. The kind that isn't about defenses or resource allocation. May's smile widened, showing a hint of real curiosity. A challenge. I accept. At the archive, Kakashi was easier. He just nodded, marking a scroll. I'll bring the fungus. It's chewy. At the still point, Konan merely inclined her head, a silent assent. Hinata did not invite Sasuke. Nor did she invite Naruto. This was for the stolen ones. The crew. But as sunset painted the sky in artificial bands of orange and violet, and Hinata set up a simple cooking fire in the plaza, using real, seasoned wood Kuratsuchi had grudgingly provided, she wasn't surprised to see them both arrive. Naruto came first, drawn by the unfamiliar, wonderful smell of onions sautéing in a pan Hinata had coaxed from the city. He stood at the edge of the firelight, a silhouette against the darkening spire. He didn't speak. Sasuke came later, a shadow detaching itself from the gloom of her tower. She stood even farther back, arms crossed, watching with her Sharingan deactivated, her expression inscrutable. Hinata ignored them both, focusing on her task. She had made a stew, a humble, hearty thing of fungi, radishes, and herbs in a savory broth. The rice Kuratsuchi produced was slightly overcooked and stuck to the bottom of the improvised steamer, but it was hot and real. Kakashi's fungus added a strange, earthy depth. They sat on stones Hinata had arranged around the fire. Kuratsuchi, May, Kakashi, Konan, Hinata. An unlikely circle. For a while, the only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the clink of wooden bowls. It needs soy sauce, Kuratsuchi announced after her first bite. It needs about 100 different things, Kakashi agreed. But it's food. Real food. It is adequate sustenance, Konan stated. May took a delicate bite, chewed thoughtfully. The balance of flavors is primitive, yet sincere. It speaks of necessity. I find it refreshing. They ate. And then, slowly, they talked. Not about the city, or the void, or the ethics of their existence. Kuratsuchi told a story about her grandfather, the third Tsuchikage, and how he'd once used his dust release not to destroy a mountain, but to precisely carve a stubborn, ancient tree stump from his favorite meditation spot, just because his wife had complained about it. Took him 3 days of focused effort. For a tree stump. The man was an artist and an idiot. Kakashi, prompted, told a heavily edited, sanitized story about Minato Namikaze trying to teach a young, distractible genin team how to properly scale a cliff, which devolved into a contest of who could stick to the wall the longest using only chakra adhesion. Guy won, by falling asleep and somehow staying attached. Mei shared a surprisingly funny anecdote about early diplomatic talks with the Land of Water's daimyo, where she had to negotiate a trade deal while a particularly amorous octopus kept attempting to court one of the elderly ministers. Even Konan spoke, her papery voice soft. Yahiko once tried to fold 1,000 paper cranes for good luck before a battle. He got to 997 before Nagato accidentally sat on them. Yahiko was furious for a week. Nagato just kept saying, the luck was in the effort, not the cranes. They were small stories. Human stories. Flawed, funny, poignant. Stories that had nothing to do with why they were here. Stories that proved they had lives before this, lives that contained more than just the pain Naruto had intercepted. Hinata watched them talk, a small, warm feeling kindling in her chest. This was what she had wanted. Not a strategy session. A hearth. A moment where they weren't prisoners or pieces, but people sharing a meal. As the fire died down to embers, the conversation lulled into a comfortable silence. The false stars were bright overhead. It was then that Sasuke, who had been watching from the darkness, spoke. Her voice carried clearly in the still air. You are all remarkably adaptable. You sit, you eat, you tell stories, as if this is a campfire after a mission. Not the anteroom to oblivion. The warm mood didn't shatter. It cooled, tempered. We are shinobi, Kuratsuchi said, not turning to look at her. We adapt. Or we die. Adapting to damnation is still damnation, Sasuke replied. Perhaps, Mei said, sipping water from a cup. But even in damnation, one can choose the quality of the company. And the seasoning of the stew. A faint, almost smile might have touched Sasuke's lips. It was hard to tell in the gloom. Naruto finally stepped into the circle of fading light. He looked at the empty bowls, the smiling, tired faces. He looked at Hinata, who met his gaze steadily. He saw no pity there. No fear. Just a quiet acknowledgement. This was good, he said, his voice rough. Thank you, Hinata. She nodded. He turned and walked back towards his spire. The others began to disperse, taking their bowls, dousing the embers. The perfect plaza would absorb the minor mess by morning. It was a perfect, fragile day. The closest thing to peace they had known since their arrivals. Hinata was the last to leave. She stood, looking up at the sky, feeling a strange, bittersweet contentment. They had built a moment of real connection, on stolen land, with borrowed lives. It was a tiny, defiant fire in the vast dark. As she turned to go, her Byakugan, from lifelong habit, automatically made one last, sweeping scan of the city and the sky above it. She froze. High above, at the zenith of the Pocket Dimensions dome, where the false stars twinkled most densely, she saw it. A hairline crack. Not in the stone or the sky, but in the fabric of reality itself. It was a jagged, silent line of absolute black, so thin it was almost invisible. It didn't pulse. It didn't bleed void. It just was. A flaw in the painting. A stress fracture in the snow globe. And as she watched, with the cold clarity of the Byakugan, she saw it lengthen. Just by a millimeter. A silent, inevitable spread. The heart's warmth fled from her body, replaced by a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. She stood there, her bowl cold in her hands, staring at the impossible, tiny fracture in their world's ceiling. The perfect day was over. The silence that followed was no longer companionable. It was the silence of a held breath, waiting for the glass to shatter. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, the memory of laughter and shared stories now ash in her mouth, her eyes fixed on the abyss that had just quietly introduced itself, far above their fragile, borrowed hearth. Chapter 14, The Tide of Nothing. Hinata did not sleep. She stood on the highest point of her garden wall, the Byakugan a permanent, aching strain around her eyes, tracking the crack in the sky. It did not grow quickly. It was a patient, geological terror, spreading by microns per hour. By dawn's false light, it had branched, forming a tiny, black, jagged tree against the lavender. She went to Kakashi first. He was already awake, scrolls of astrological calculations and dimensional theory spread around him in the archive. He didn't look up as she entered. "You've seen it," he stated. "Yes." "What is it?" "The consequence," he said, his voice flat. "The bill coming due. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. He's been pulling matter, energy, consciousness from other streams into this closed system. The universe, or the multiverse, abhors a paradox. It's seeking balance. That crack is the pressure release valve. Or the first trickle of the flood that will wash this paradox away. How long? Unknown. The structure is resilient, it's made of his will and the Void Maw's residue. But it's under constant tension. The battle with Root, the summoning of the Uchiha, each one stressed it. The crack is a symptom of systemic failure. They gathered the council at May's command, not at sunset, but immediately, in the stark light of the fake morning. The mood in the Coral Tower's strategy room was grim. Naruto was present, his face a mask of stone, but his star-pitted eyes were fixed on the table, avoiding the pearlescent ceiling. Hinata described what she saw. Kakashi gave his cold analysis. Kuratsuchi ran calculations on structural integrity based on the crack's location. Sasuke stood apart, by the window, her back to them, listening. "It is a wound," Konan said from her seat, her petrified leg stretched out before her. "Like mine. But in the sky. It will not heal. It will only widen." "Can we patch it?" May asked, looking at Naruto. He finally spoke. "I can feel it. It's not a thing I can mend. It's a law being broken. My existence here is the law being broken. To seal it, I would have to unmake the foundation of this place. Unmake myself." "Unacceptable," Kuratsuchi snapped. "We are the foundation too, now. Our lives are woven into this reality's matrix. You collapse, we collapse." "There may be another way," Kakashi said slowly. All eyes turned to him. "We don't fight the pressure. We redirect it. We give the paradox an outlet that isn't catastrophic collapse." "What kind of outlet?" Naruto asked. "A controlled bleed," Kakashi said. "We create a stabilized, permanent portal. A release valve for the dimensional pressure. It would mean officially linking Uzushio to one other reality. Letting energy and possibility flow both ways, in a controlled manner. It would normalize this place, make it less of a sealed paradox and more of a bridge." The implications hung in the air, immense and terrifying. "Link to which reality?" May asked, her mind already racing through the political ramifications. "My unified territories? Kuratsuchi's IWA? The world of the Root?" "It would have to be a stable, robust stream," Kakashi said. "One capable of absorbing the metaphysical shock. And one where our presence wouldn't cause further disruptions." "There is only one that fits," Sasuke said from the window, her voice cutting through the debate. She turned to face them. "The world you came from, Hataki. The one that sent the scouts. It's already aware of the breach. It's resilient. It's used to anomalies. And it has a governance structure that could negotiate." "You propose we surrender to the council that just tried to obliterate us?" Kuratsuchi growled. "I propose we choose our annexation," Sasuke replied coldly. "Instead of being erased by an impersonal force, we broker a treaty with a tangible one. We offer them the bridge. In exchange for sovereignty. For recognized status." It was a breathtaking gamble. To willingly tether their fragile pocket universe to the very power that had attacked them. May's eyes lit up. A diplomatic solution to an existential crisis. "We negotiate from a position of unique value, we are a stable pocket dimension, a resource, a strategic asset. And we have him." She nodded at Naruto. "The ultimate deterrent and bargaining chip." Naruto listened, the weight of their planning settling on him. They were discussing the fate of his creation, his sin, without him. And they were making sense. "Could it work?" he asked Kakashi. "Theoretically. Practically? It would be the most complex diplomatic and fuinjutsu operation in history. We'd have to build the bridgehead here, then signal them to build the receiving gate on their side. It would require immense power, precision, and trust. And it would mean the end of Uzushio as a closed paradise. It becomes a border town. A nexus." "Better a border town than a tomb," Hinata whispered. The decision was made. They would attempt the bridge. Kakashi and Kuratsuchi would design the physical and fuinjutsu framework, the valve. May and, reluctantly, Sasuke, would draft the treaty parameters, the opening gambit for negotiation. Naruto would be the power source. Hinata would be the lookout, monitoring the crack and any changes in the city's stability. Konan would observe. Her unique, half-petrified state made her a living sensor for the void's encroachment. Work began with a desperate energy. The armory's forges roared day and night. The archive scrolls spilled out into the plaza. The elegant peace of Uzushio was shattered by the sounds of industry and urgent debate. They had 3 days, by Kakashi's pessimistic estimate. On the second day, the tide arrived. It began not at the crack, but at the sealed scar in the Soul Grove. Konan, sitting sentinel there, felt it first, a wrongness in the stillness. The blue-gold light rimming the scar flickered, then dimmed. A cold far deeper than the grove's usual chill seeped out. Not the aggressive nullity of the whispering chasm, but something older, more profound. A lethargic void. She did not run. She folded a paper crane and sent it fluttering up to the surface, a silent alarm. By the time Naruto and the others reached the grove, the scar was bleeding. Not energy, but a thick, gray, viscous fluid that pooled on the floor and began to spread, consuming the light and sound around it. Where it touched, the pulsing walls didn't wither, they slumped, losing all definition, becoming inert, formless sludge. And from the pool, shapes began to coalesce. They were not creatures. They were absences given approximate form. They looked like sketches of people, animals, things, made from the gray fluid, their edges blurring and melting. They had no faces, no features, only a silent, desperate hunger. They were the tide of nothing, the passive, entropic residue of the void, drawn to the weakening structure like rot to a dying tree. One of the shapes, vaguely humanoid, lurched towards a cluster of healthy blooms. It didn't attack. It leaned against them. The vibrant colors of the petals dulled, the images within slowing, then freezing. The blooms sagged, joining the growing gray mass. "They're not fighting," Kakashi said, his voice tight with a new kind of horror. "They're disinteresting. They make reality lose the will to be." Naruto acted. He slammed a wave of indigo energy into the pool. It parted the gray fluid, but didn't dissipate it. The fluid simply flowed back together, slower, more listless than before. His power could destroy, could rewrite. But this was not an active enemy. This was the end of activity. It was immune to force of will. A gray shape oozed towards Konan. She stood, unmoving, as it reached her petrified leg. The gray fluid touched the featureless paper skin, and did nothing. It seemed confused by her existing state of nullity. It slid past her, towards the exit. "They're heading for the city," Kuratsuchi yelled. The battle for Uzushio was not a battle. It was a contagion. The tide oozed up from the grove and into the streets. Where it flowed, the perfect pearl and obsidian lost its luster, becoming dull, pitted, and soft. A building didn't collapse, it sagged, its angles becoming indistinct, like a sandcastle at low tide. They tried everything. Kuratsuchi's superheated rock and metal just sank into the gray muck and cooled into lumpen, useless shapes. Kakashi's fuinjutsu seals fizzled, their ordered energy unraveling into nonsense. Hinata's gentle fist strikes passed through the forms with no effect, there were no chakra points to disrupt, only a profound lack. Only Naruto had any effect. By focusing his will into intense, localized creation, forcing a wall of vibrant, detailed crystal to erupt from the ground, or a tree of burning, golden light to sprout, he could temporarily hold back the tide. His creations would blaze with defiant reality, and the gray would shy away from the intensity of being. But it was a draining, holding action. For every wall he made, the tide would simply flow around, or wait until his focus lapsed and the creation began to fade, then absorb it. They fought a retreating action through the beautiful, dying city. The eastern garden was the first to fall. Hinata watched as her koi pond turned into a flat, gray puddle, the fish vanishing not with a pop, but with a slow fading, as if they'd never been interesting enough to exist. Her heart broke silently. The archive was next. Scrolls didn't burn, their ink ran and blended into meaningless gray stains on parchment that itself dissolved into pulp. Sasuke fought with a fierce, desperate creativity, using her lightning not to electrocute, but to try and define, carving sharp, clear lines in the air to stem the gray flow. It worked for moments, the electricity holding a border of crisp reality, but the constant drain on her chakra was immense. Her Sharingan spun wildly, not with copy jutsu, but with the horrifying, predictive certainty of their loss. She could see the paths of the tide's advance, and there were too many. Mei was a general without an army. She directed, she identified weak points, she used her water release to create moats, but the water just became heavy, gray slurry. Her political acumen was useless against an enemy with no mind, only a directionless hunger. It was Konan who made the first sacrifice. As the tide approached her still point pavilion, she did not flee. She walked into the advancing gray. It enveloped her, merging with her already petrified half. The process accelerated. The gray crept up her torso, down her other arm. As it reached her face, she turned her head, her one good eye finding Naruto's across the ruined plaza. There was no fear. No sorrow. Just a final, peaceful acceptance. It is quieter now, she whispered, her voice the last clear sound before the gray swallowed her completely. She became a statue of uniform, inert gray, then slowly melted into the general mass, her unique stillness absorbed into the universal stillness. Conan. Hinata cried out, but there was no time for grief. The tide was at the gates of the armory. Kuratsuchi made her stand in the entrance, her hammer glowing with forged-in fuinjutsu. You will not take my forge, she roared, and brought the hammer down on the leading edge of the gray. A shockwave of ordered energy pulsed out, forcing the tide back for a dozen yards. But it settled, and began to advance again, slower, but inexorable. Kuratsuchi's arms trembled with exhaustion. Naruto, panting, his indigo cloak now thin and translucent, stood beside Kakashi on the steps of the coral tower, which was now half dulled, its vibrant coral color fading to a sickly pink. The bridge, Kakashi gasped, clutching a bleeding cut on his arm where a gray tendril had brushed him, leaving not a wound but a patch of numb, senseless skin. We have to activate it now. Use the crisis as the energy source. The dimensional pressure is peaking. It's not ready. Naruto said. The receiving gate, they won't be prepared on the other side. It could tear both worlds. If we don't, there won't be a world here at all. Kakashi yelled. Above them, with a sound like a mountain sighing, the crack in the sky split wide open. It wasn't a hole. It was a gash. And through it poured not the tide, but a wind. A wind that carried no scent, made no sound, but stole the will to breathe. The very air of Uzushio began to grow thin and apathetic. This was it. The end. Not with a bang, but with a whimper of universal disinterest. Naruto looked at his broken city, at his exhausted, defiant companions. At Hinata, standing protectively before a cowering, mental image of her father's house. At Kuratsuchi, still swinging her hammer against the endless gray. At Sasuke, her lightning sputtering, her proud head bowed in final, furious defeat. At Mei, calculating even now the exact moment of their extinction. At Kakashi, the ghost who had tried to clean up the mess. He had built this to quiet the silence. He had brought them here to fill his void. And now the true silence was coming to claim them all. He made his decision. Kakashi, he shouted over the soundless wind. Activate the valve. Now. Channel everything through me. Aim for my world's last known coordinates. The one with the root. You'll be the conduit. The energy could unmake you. Kakashi warned. Naruto's star-pitted eyes met his. For the first time, they held not grief, not guilt, but a clear, calm purpose. That's the idea. Use me as the spark. To light the bridge. To get them out. He didn't wait for agreement. He threw his arms wide, facing the gash in the sky. He stopped trying to hold back the tide. He stopped trying to preserve his world. He began to pull. Not from the void. From himself.